Think about it. Your dream started in the middle of the implant procedure. Everything after that, the chases, the trip to Mars, the suite at the Hilton, are all elements of your recall holiday and ego trip.
Hello and welcome once again to the Cine-Files, where each week we enter the world of a great film. We explore its themes, the history, the filmmaking, and the influence it has on us today. My name is Steve Morris. I am a filmmaker and directing instructor in Los Angeles, California.
Hello, everyone. My name is John Rocha. I'm a writer, producer, and host and voiceover guy here in San Diego, California, and very excited to be continuing our trip into Mars.
And of course, we couldn't go to Mars without our very special guest, the producer of one of the greatest podcasts of all time, WTF with Marc Maron, Brendon McDonald. Welcome back to the Cine-Files.
Thank you, guys. I feel like I was the one who booked our tickets on this trip, right?
No, I think you did. I think you did. So,
yeah.
Which means that everything that happens from this point forward is kind of your fault.
Yeah.
I mean, well, I could very easily, swallow the pill and wake us all up if you'd like.
I don't know. We're mixing our pills. I'm like, now I'm really concerned that I'm going to get the red pill from Total Recall or the
and
red
not
pill
the Matrix one.
Yeah. So if you are ready for it, let's just jump right back in. Where we left off, we were at this factory. Quaid had unpacked this bag, pulled out this device, and there saw himself on the screen.
Now, whatever your name is, get ready for the big surprise. You are not you. You're me. No shit.
And again, I think Arnold's ability to now play two totally different characters he's come so far as an actor since we first saw him like a decade earlier.
And it's just a little bit of like a hairstyle difference too, physically. Yeah. Like it's same Arnold on the screen as there with the, towel on his head. But Arnold on the screen has kind of like a little bit of a, conservative haircut.
Yes, totally.
Yeah, and after having seen the series on Netflix, this is real estate Arnold versus
totally.
Regular Arnold, right? Like this is how he'd show up to do real estate and on the screen there. But regular Arnold is what we see on the screen on our screens watching the movie.
You know what, John? I think that is a great point because what I really think it is so Quaid is this, strangely enough, Arnold playing this somewhat nebbishy character who's not living up to his potential, who feels stuck in his life. Hauser is Arnold.
Yeah.
Is the uber confident, always has a smile on his face, having a good time, very successful, has everything put together, fairly conservative person.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, this is why ultimately I think Arnold is the one and only choice for the film. And it's probably why no one in their right mind ever even references the Colin Farrell remake from several years ago, right? And if you think about it, it's crazy because in the entire development of this film, they were trying for the idea, which is, characteristic of Philip K. Dick's stories, that this guy is the everyman, and it just so happens that the secret life or embedded life is of a fantasy and a superhero. The sense in the reality of this film is that Quaid should be a Superman because Hauser is. Yeah. He's a massive action hero, or action villain, essentially, but he's a secret agent who should be able to crush your neck and should be able to do all this gunplay, and he is the power center of the film, is Hauser, the one you're seeing on the screen. So, of course, in the reality of this film, Quaid should be that too, but you have to then trick Quaid into thinking he's a regular guy. So, okay, put him at a construction site instead of at an office job as an accountant. Like, I always heard this thing of like, oh, Arnold being cast in this film was more like parody of it, right? Oh, this is what Americans see themselves as, right? It's like the kind of Verhoeven winking satire of his sci-fi films. But I just think it's accurate. He should be Arnold.
What's so great about your point is where it fits perfectly is the difference between the short story and the movie. Because in the short story, we do find out that he was a spy, but it's all really slim. It's a very, very small thing. And what your point is the more you develop the idea that he was this spy, the more it actually becomes necessary for him to be Arnold and not Richard Dreyfuss, who they were originally going to cast.
All my life I worked for Mars Intelligence. I did Cohagen's dirty work. But a few weeks ago I met somebody, a woman, And I learned a few things, like I've been playing for the wrong team.
So this, which we think is the truth, is actually the lie. Is that this is the, or might be the lie, that Hauser is now telling a version of himself to get him to do what he wouldn't do or believe what he needs to believe and able to succeed in this crazy mission.
See, there's enough shit in here to fuck Cohagen good. Now, unfortunately, if you're listening to this, that means that he has got to me first. And here comes the hard part, old buddy. Now it is all up to you.
I love how he keeps doing that, calling him buddy and pal. And one of my favorite little touches about this.
You know what occurred to me watching this is that this totally reminds me of a thing that didn't really exist in 1990, which is the talking head on the video game that's going to tell you what your mission is.
Mm.
Yeah, like there was a max headroom, but that was about as close as we got to something like that. But yeah, it's a great point, Steve. Eventually that would become something we would see in video games right after this movie for a little while, for sure.
Just totally. The NPC comes along and says, okay, you need to go into the tavern and meet this person and get this thing to go do that thing. You know, that happens all the time.
First, let's get rid of that bug in your head. Take this thing out of the case and stick it up your nose. Ugh. Don't worry, it's self-guiding.
Right away, I'm very uncomfortable with what's about to happen.
Just shove real hard.
Do you think you would be able to do this if some strange version of yourself said you got to get that bug out of your nose?
Yeah. When we have to do COVID testing, it was essentially that, shoving that.
It really was.
Right? Shoving that damn Q-tip all the way up your nose when you had to do it for yourself. So it was as close to what he might have been feeling in that moment until they started yanking that massive thing out of his nostril. Then no, I would not have wanted to do that.
So it is so nasty. And this is I believe another Arnold puppet. I think these puppets are amazing.
Yeah, this is a Rob Bottin puppet. Yeah.
I think it looks he's so good at making it lifelike and capturing some essence of a distorted face Arnold.
Well, I think we didn't really talk a lot about the special effects in the first part of this that we did. And maybe right now is just a good point for saying a few things just in the fact that, okay, this is one area of the special effects. And I think that's one of the things that made this movie so spectacular. It's also why it's arguably at the time it was made, the most expensive movie ever made. That it could be one or two others that cost more, but they got like a murderer's row of special effects people to do this. And then the larger VXF operation was Dream Quest, which was just coming off the abyss, and which would later beget Terminator 2. And it really it's very, like, when you say this is one of the most expensive movies ever made, and at that time the price tag on it was astronomical, it does make sense because it really is this final curtain call for generations of effects, right? Like, we're about to move into the T2 Jurassic Park digital age. Yes, and there's as many media of VFX shots as you can think of in this movie. And it's just all integrated so well.
It's such a great point, because I don't think we think, like, today, I mean, there's still practical effects. People are still doing makeup effects. They're still doing costume effects and explosions and things like that. But if you look at a big movie, the lion's share is going to be CG. It's going to be, I don't know what the percentages is. I couldn't begin to tell you. 60%, 70%, depends on the movie, but it's going to be a big hunk, which means that the skills in making that stuff, not that they're not amazing skills and that they're incredibly talented people who are doing all that work, are all in the computer, as opposed to, you got to know how to use fabrics and fire and construction and small things and big things and makeup. And it's like the Swiss Army knife of skills that people coming into these practical effects departments brings is absolutely incredible. And it is, and this, maybe you're right, Brendon, maybe this is the pinnacle of all of those things coming together.
Yeah, certainly a last gasp, if nothing else. Yeah.
Well, what I also really love about it all being this culmination is that everything is state of the art. In fact, this wins the Academy Award for visual effects with no competition. They just felt that there were no other nominees that year that matched up to it, and they just give it the award on its own. And so, yes, there's no denying this is the state of the art. These are the peak level effects, but the movie still has the aesthetic of, like, canon films, right? Because of just the nature of it being on Mars, of it being on sets, of the pulpy source material. So like you can have that without, if this were a movie made now and you're, even just a great movie, like think of something like Minority Report, the visual look of that is so defined by the technology that Spielberg is able to harness at that time. And he has to match, his camera work along with these state-of-the-art effects. With this, because you're using matte paintings, you're using dummies, you're using masks, you're using stop motion, it can still look like those, cheapy B-movie VHS rentals that we all loved in the 80s. It's just a really expensive, great-feeling version of that.
Now this is the plan. Get your ass to Mars. Then go to the Hilton and flash that Brubaker ID at the desk. That's all there's to it. Just do what I tell you, and we can nail that son of a bitch who fucked you and me. I'm counting on you, buddy. Don't let me down.
Another buddy.
We're going to do Pumping Iron after this. I guess we're kind of letting people know, or at least I am. And this, hearing him say buddy and pal and all of that throughout this episode, it makes me think of some of the ways he spoke to some of the guys in that documentary. And it's so unnatural when he says it, because it feels like he's trying to assimilate and condescend at the same time. So it's a fascinating delivery for the words buddy and pal, because he's saying them like an immigrant would try to say that to sound more American, but also the way he's delivering it is like so like patting you on the head as he says it. So I love that he's got that just natural delivery for these words that stayed out to me when I watch him in this film.
Do you think you would like to hang out, be in the posse of Arnold during peak Arnold era?
Oh,
I can say certainly not.
Brendon, come over. It's 3 a.m. Help me.
Oh, I remember, so we had him on WTF. I'm based in New York, and I'm very rarely out in LA when Mark does the interviews, but there was an option for me to go out there when Arnold was there, and I thought twice about it. I gave it a little thought, but I was like, you know what? I don't need like the psychic damage of Arnold being like, oh, look at this puny man right here. This is your boss? Is this the boss? He's so tiny and puny.
Just picking you up with one hand and shaking you around.
Yeah, right.
I'm out too. And it's so funny because I really genuinely like and admire Arnold.
Yeah.
A lot.
Absolutely.
On all sorts of levels.
Yeah.
And particularly in this era, and as you said, we're going to do Pumping Iron, and some of the stuff he does is like the constant macho intenseness of I just can't handle it. Having had friends like this, and in particular our friend the Urban Barbarian, who is really an Arnold disciple.
Yes.
Like there's only so much of it I can handle. I am not a macho guy,
Yeah.
Yeah, he and our friend turned my balls to liquid one time. So yeah, it's not my
I was there. I saw I watched that.
Yeah, and with Arnold, I think now would be the time to know him. Now, because he's much more relaxed, and they talk about, like, I'm watching a comedian talking about doing Arnold. Says you can't even make fun of Arnold because he makes fun of himself so much all the time now, and he leans into it that it's almost impossible, right? So I was watching him on Conan recently, that interview he did, which I thought was hilarious. I'm like, yeah, this is a completely different person than the guy from back then, because now he tells a story of how he tricked Sylvester Stallone into doing Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. So not only if you were in his sphere would he absolutely use you up, even if you were his arguable equal, he would still find a way to destroy you. So that being with Arnold at this stage in my life, at that time I don't think I would have had the psychological strength to deal with it for sure.
No, when he tells that story about Stop or My Mom Will Shoot, he says when we were in our war, like he was thinking that this is an arms race against Sly. I got to kill him.
Right.
Well, and this world, and this is, again, it really is true. Our friend Dan Panosian, who's a fantastic, unbelievably brilliant artist, also known as the Urban Barbarian, was a serious Arnold disciple.
Yes.
And there was so much time with him where he would say things and I'd be like, is this real? Are you really, like, are you angry at me? Is it not? Are you messing? Like, what the hell is
he's
happening?
A behemoth, like massive weights in
back
his
in the day.
prime.
Like he was huge. So anyway, we've reached sort of one version of the plot, and I would like to take a moment to review what are the possible realities going on here. So reality number one is there's this guy named Doug Quaid who's an ordinary guy who works a construction job despite being ridiculously jacked. I don't know quite how he has the time to pull off this physique, but other than that, he's totally normal. He's not terribly happy in his marriage. He's a little bit disappointed in his life. He's having dreams of some special destiny that all of us could relate to because we've all had those kinds of dreams. And he goes to this place to get a memory inserted, and something goes horribly wrong, and he is lying on the bed in Recall having a psychotic episode where elements of this dream they put into his brain have matched with elements of his life to create this fantasy that he cannot escape from. Is that a correct layout of one possible reality?
Well, as we know it now in the film, yes. Although I would like to point out later that specific reality, and you're about to mention another possibility, but the one you just mentioned winds up splitting itself. So by the end of the film, you actually have 3 realities.
Oh, well, I cannot wait to get in, because that was one of my other questions is sort of, are there mixed versions of these two that kind of come along?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So reality number 2, we've just been informed of, which is there is this guy, Hauser, who is a spy who realized at this point was working for the bad guy because he fell in love with this woman and he was about to take the bad guy down when the bad guy got to him first and erased his memory, dropped him on Earth, and has for some reason put Richter and these other people to watch him and set him up in a new life with a new wife. And that the recall situation revived some of these memories, and that's why they're trying to kill him. And now he has to go back to Mars to take down Cohagen because Hauser is an enemy of Cohagen. Is that basically correct?
Yeah, that's it. And really, you can even break it down even simpler to this point at that wherever we're at in the film, 50-minute mark or so, that you have two paths to take right now. One is this is all a dream, or one is everything you're seeing is exactly true. And as a viewer, what I think is so clever about this movie is where we're about to get in another 10 or 15 minutes, they pull the rug out from under you thinking that you're a step ahead of them. That's the kind of genius of the screenplay, that it was very obvious, even for me, I guess, however old I was, 11 years old, watching this for the first time, that at this point of the film, I was contemplating both of those realities.
And to be clear, Hauser, who ostensibly is a good guy in the way we're thinking about this at this moment, knew that he might get grabbed before he could institute his plan to take down Cohagen. So he contacted another spy who he set up with this suitcase just in case Cohagen captured him first and erased his memory.
That's right.
Right.
Okay. But in another scenario, that's not true.
Right.
So why this guy with the suitcase showed up or how that fits in, this is where, and it is funny, I definitely want to dig in to the most minute detail into all of this stuff, while saying in advance, maybe it's not a good idea to dig into the most minute detail because things are going to start to fall apart.
Yeah. I don't know if we said this in the first episode. I think if I remember correctly, maybe Brendon said this, but it's a choose your own adventure movie. Like, you can decide after this interaction with himself on the screen, you can decide for yourself what is the truth after the movie is over. And this is the starting off point of where you decide which of these narratives you want to believe or strikes you as the believable narrative by the time the movie is over. So I kind of I'm always in the camp that this was Doug and he was doing it the whole time. And that by the end, he was never going to turn on, Quato or anything like that. So that's how I view the film. But I can absolutely see the film in the other narratives, and it makes total sense, which is kind of smart, really.
So Quaid gets this device out of his nose, and I like that he puts it into a little piece of food and tosses to the rat. That's just a little detail that's going to come back later. The guys come in, and they open fire, on the red dot, which is, of course, the rats that are running around with the little bug. While this is going on, as Hauser is still speaking on that screen, and we hear "Get your ass to Mars," and as Richter opens fire and blood from the rats is spraying everywhere, it gets on the screen, and we just get into a repeat of
"Get your ass to Mars. Get your ass to Mars. Get your ass to Mars."
Cut to Flying to Mars. This shot was made by a combo of DreamQuest and ILM. As you said, Brendon, this is just the top of effects people at the time. And initially, this shot was supposed to be in this movie. They ran out of money. They cut the shot. And they went to Arnold and said, look, we have no shot of space, like nothing. And so we're going to be on Earth and just appear on Mars. And Arnold went and made it happen. And I couldn't quite tell, but it sounded like, by the way they told the story, that Arnold paid for this shot out of his pocket.
That was what I understood it to be. Yeah.
Yeah. I could, so I'm glad you got that impression as well. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes back to, this is Arnold's movie, you know,
yes.
Making this happen. To say the score is awesome here has now become very redundant, but it is. And we've arrived at immigration, and people's passports are getting stamped. And there's, again, the design is great of Mars, in particular that everybody is dressed in gray, except for this very large woman who's in orange with red hair. And boy, does she stand out.
Which on the rewatch, or any rewatch you do of this, you can notice a little piece of that fabric hanging out of the suitcase that Arnold has when he's in the factory. So, you know, when you're watching it again, you're like, oh, this is part of his Hauser kit.
And she lines up to get her passport stamped. And at the same time, Richter appears and is met by soldiers, including Mark Alimo Everett, who is another actor who is in tons of stuff, serious theater actor, tons of TV since the 70s, multiple Star Trek appearances. Most importantly, he is Gul Dukat in DS9. And he's such a good actor. And you could see it. I'm mixed on DS9, but you could some of the stuff that he does is fantastic.
Yeah.
Mr. Cohagen wants to see you right away.
Any news of Quaid?
Not since you lost him.
Watch your mouth, Captain.
While that's happening, and they see some graffiti that says Kuato lives.
What the hell's this?
The Martians love Kuato. They think he's fucking George Washington.
And while this is going on, we have this very striking woman has arrived at passports.
So how long do you plan to stay on Mars?
2 weeks.
And they ask,
Have you brought any fruits or vegetables onto the planet?
and she says,
2 weeks.
and then there's this, my feeling is this goes on too long and it goes too silly of her repeating 2 weeks and weird face grabbing, and she can't control her face and the face is stretching, and it goes on a really long time.
I wrote down when I was watching it that I was appreciative of how willing they were with this to just let it develop.
Yeah,
right?
just go all out. Yeah.
And it was like, yes, it gets weird and silly, but also part of that is they're like, again, with all of the crafts people that they had working on this, they knew they had the goods. One of those people is Goldsmith, who this is like one of the best parts of integration of score and the actual physical filmmaking, the way the shots are constructed, the like zoom into her amidst this crowd, and you're getting almost kind of from Richter's POV where his eyes are squinting and he sees this, you get a real fast zoom to her and he's like,
Quaid. That's Quaid.
the music starts pumping, bam, 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 bam. I could go back and watch this scene again right now.
And she's looking panicked. All the guns are drawn on her, and she backs away, reaches up, grabs her ear, and then again, these puppets are totally amazing. The way this thing opens up, revealing Arnold.
Yeah, and it's like revealing a puppet within the puppet, because that's clearly like another Arnold puppet inside this head that opens up.
And then as soon as he takes this head off, he has an entirely different body shape.
Well, that's like, there's a lot of questionable things about this lady suit. One is, yes, why it was like a different body while the head was on, and then I guess it's like one of those inflatable mascots, I guess, right? Like it that has a fan in it and blows it up. But also, you're telling me this very high-tech, probably, secretive technology that the spy was able to sneak to his, memory wiped self, is only capable of answering the one question with the answer 2 weeks. And if any other question is thrown at it, it will go completely on the digital fritz and give up its cover. Like, that seems to be a small design flaw in this giant costume.
I think it's clearly having a glitch. I don't think it's performing up to specs.
Right. Maybe test that one out.
I also think Quaid's, because he doesn't have his full memory back, may not have programmed this thing correctly. And so there's a possibility. That's the defense
user error.
Yeah, exactly. User error. But I also think really, in reality, I think Verhoeven and the special effects people want to show off what they could do. And that's why this scene is so, as you said, Steve, a little bit long, but still fun to watch when you see it.
Well, right. I did want to say something about it being long. And then again, going back to that Canon Films aesthetic, it's like, then what winds up happening happens.
And then Arnold is holding his head, and he throws it, and the head says,
"Get ready for a surprise!"
And the head explodes
and kills people. Like, that's people. Great thing.
Well, a lot of people are going to die. And then,
yes.
Even though in the introduction, Welcome to Mars, they talked about airlocks and air and safety and all this stuff, Richter immediately opens fires, blows out a window. Suddenly, everybody is getting sucked out. Quaid grabs this bar, is being pulled towards the window. In this case, I believe he's on wires. Later on, when they do it, he's going to be hanging vertically to pull off the same gag.
And there's a dude that has to push an airlock. Yeah. Like, it's not automatic. It's like we're so analog in this moment because that's the way to heighten all the excitement. Like, people are going to get blown out the windows. So this guy has to slowly crawl to the red button and hit it. It's perfect. I love this scene.
They manage to close the shields. Air comes in. Arnold drops down, vaults over a thing, slides under the door just as the doors are closing, and he gets away.
Yeah.
He is on a train, and we're hearing some exposition about Cohaagen raising the price of air and the war and terrorists. And then we see this train is going past the mountains of Mars, and Arnold asks a bystander,
"Excuse me, what's that?"
You mean the pyramid mine? I used to work there till I found that alien shit inside.
That is exactly a poor exposition line in your bad sci-fi movie when you need to get the information out. I used to work there till I found that alien shit inside, or even in a video game. You know what I mean? And so I think that hints at the falseness of the narrative while we're establishing the reality of the narrative.
Yeah, yeah.
And then we have this shot of the train going into a tunnel where you can see Arnold and the other characters projected on the inside of the train. This was really really hard to do.
Yeah.
Because the train's a model, it's a miniature, but then you had to do, the camera is moving, so you had to do computer-controlled camera moves. The computer-controlled camera moves had to match the images that are projected on the screens on the train going into the thing. There's just so much going on to pull off this, 4-second shot, maybe.
Yeah, I think this similar thing happens later when they're in the mines. And I remember Arnold talking about how, like, literally every step they took had to be ultra precise because it had to fit in this very small, narrow space on the matte painting.
Mm. Well, and to be specific about it, movies are flat screens. And anytime a camera is moving, our perspective on a three-dimensional object changes, so things become bigger and smaller as the camera rotates. But a flat image doesn't do that. Therefore, the flat image has to have exactly precisely the same camera moves so that 3D space within the flat image matches what's happening in the other image when you're compositing the shots, which is why when Star Wars came along and they started to do computer-controlled camera moves, they could start to do all this stuff. But if it's off just a little bit, then nothing matches, and it just doesn't. Our eyes say this doesn't look right. We are with Cohaagen in his office. He's looking out his window as Richter enters. One of the things, by the way, that made this really hard is they went, we're on Mars. Therefore, everything should be lit really red. We want it to look red. Also, we're shooting everything against green screens. So there's this huge, flat, well-lit, glowing, bright green screen behind everybody where we want everyone to look red. This is like, I don't know how they pulled it off. Like, it's so hard to pull off those two things.
Do you know why I'm such a happy person?
No, sir.
Because I've got the greatest job in the solar system. As long as the turbinium keeps flowing, I can do anything I want. Anything. In fact, The only thing I ever worry about is that one day, if the rebels win, it all might end.
So first of all, again, it's like classic bad movie exposition. And then he says,
and you're fucking making it happen. First you try and kill Quaid, and then you let him get away.
I think Ronny Cox does a perfect job of being exactly correctly over the top.
Yeah, totally.
He had help from our side, sir.
I know that.
But I thought...
Who told you to think? I don't give you enough information to think.
Well, clearly he didn't give him very good information.
No, the whole time it's like all you have to tell Richter is like 2 extra details to keep him from doing what he's doing.
One is, don't open fire on him. I absolutely 100% need him kept alive.
Yeah, there's something very important. You don't even have to tell him what. Just say that you do not kill him at all costs.
Quato wants what's in Quaid's head, and he might be able to get it because they say he's psychic. And I have a plan to keep this from happening. Do you think you could play along?
Yes, sir.
Great. Because otherwise I'll erase your ass.
So at this moment, he is now going to tell Richter exactly what he wants Richter to do, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, but it does still seem like he withholds information from him.
Absolutely. And Richter ends up doing a bunch of stuff that he shouldn't be doing.
Yes.
Based on what the plan is.
This is what as I was watching the movie this time around, and this is maybe influenced by Scott Mantz and some of his crazy theories about Blade Runner and stuff. But as I was watching the movie this time around, I was focusing on Richter because, and especially this line that you just said, Steve, I'll erase your ass. Now that could mean I'll kill you and I'll bury you somewhere no one's ever going to know. Or it could be that he has used this technology to, in essence, convince Richter that he is this thing. And maybe even convinced him and Sharon Stone's character that they're in this relationship.
Point.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to get too deep because then it'll just deconstruct everything. But like, I just was looking at it from that prism, and I thought this is pretty cool. If Ronny Cox has been using this technology over and over and over again to essentially create henchmen and henchwomen who are living out a fantasy of working for this a gangster crew or this criminal organization so they can be in charge of people and feel that feeling of being over people and in charge and condescending and strong, and people are afraid of you, so you live that fantasy life. That's very possible that he has tricked them all to be a part of this and is controlling them, and even says to Richter, I'll erase your ass. So Richter might even be at some level aware of it. It also may be why Richter keeps violating these rules from Cohaagen, because he has his own thoughts of how to do stuff, and he's breaking the rules because that's his natural personality of who he is. So just throwing that out there as a possibility. I was watching it this time around, like all of this, because even when Sharon Stone dies, there's an anger, but there's not that sense of like, oh my God, what a loss, because it seemed like he was really in love with her. But then that just kind of switches off, as the film progresses. So it just feels like that possibility could be in the air in some way. So,
well, how about this? Here's another possibility that if Doug Quaid is sitting in that chair at REKALL, and this is all just the memory implant, right? Yeah. That there could be a part of the programming where one character is of this AI is talking to the other AI and being like, you are screwing this up within this program. I may erase you within the story.
Well, I think this is a crazy idea in both ways, because A, it totally could exist within his crazy world in his dream. And B, well, at this point, Cohaagen might have programmed your affection for Laurie in Richter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He could have made the guy that's going to show up later that runs REKALL actually believe that what he's saying is true, even though it is not. You know what I mean? Like once we open up this door, like, well, anything's really possible.
Well, yeah, because what's the best way to maintain power is to create people in positions of power who are invested in maintaining your level of power by doing what they're doing. And so
you gave them a perfect life or whatever, and you could take it away.
Yeah, exactly. You have the control to take it away. So you don't want to do that, do you, pal? So just do what I'm telling you to do in the end. That's a great point, Brendon, what you said about the two AI, because if you remember the story from a couple of years ago where they had those two computers connected and they essentially achieved a level of sentience where they were having a dialogue with each other and were not going along with the plan that the humans had put into them
right.
for them to do. And they had to unplug them because they couldn't stop them as they were starting to have communications with their own language that the humans couldn't understand or the scientists couldn't understand. So
right.
it is very possible, you know, to that. But so I like that idea, actually.
How about this? And then we got to move on because we literally could be down to this rabbit hole for the rest of our lives. But okay, what if Hauser really did fall in love with Melina and is really becoming a good guy, as you just explained? Cohaagen catches him. The first thing he does is implant a memory where they're buddies, record a video where he says, hey, I'm best friends with him, puts my arm around him, I lied to you, buddy, then erases him and puts him in the Quaid body. So he has that piece of video to show to him later on to convince him of the other thing.
100%. 100%.
It's okay. Then we gotta move on. But so Quaid's walking through, you know, this crowded area. There's people calling out to him, offering him, you know, fake IDs and drugs, and there's taxi guys. And there we see for the first time, we're going to spend more time with him later, Benny, who's played by Mel Johnson Jr. He's actually a musical theater guy with a really serious Broadway kind of career. And he got this part because Paul Verhoeven's daughters saw him on the audition, one of the audition tapes, and really liked him.
Oh, wow.
And he wasn't going to take the part. He had just done what he described as a horrible blaxploitation film. Or I should say, he called it a black exploitation film. This is not like a popular blaxploitation film in the 70s. This was a not cool movie that he was very unhappy about being. He gets this script. He gets to the character of Benny. Here's the description of Benny in the script Total Recall. He is described as a black jivester.
Yikes.
And Mel Johnson Jr. throws the script across the room. He's so furious. And he says, I can't do this again. I'm not doing this again. And then you can totally picture him looking at the script across the room, and he picks it up, decides to read a little more. And he did really like the character.
Yeah.
And I think he's great in this movie. And I think it's also problematic in lots of ways we can get into.
This is the 80s and 90s, right? There's essentially no difference between him and Argyle in Die Hard, right? You had the black character.
Argyle's a good guy, though.
Yeah, but like, you know, the idea, but he was starting out as a good guy, right? Helping him, driving him everywhere. So we don't know the twist is coming at this point if we're watching the film for the first time. So they you know, the 80s and 90s, they had these characters they would throw in, and you know, sometimes black actors took it because there was not a lot of work. And so you take it in a big movie and hope it spawns other things for your career. But I can totally understand why he would throw it across the room. But I mean, the fact that you'd give him this big twist near the end, I think is why you do the film. You know?
And it ultimately then subverts that stereotype of the comedic sidekick of a lower class.
Yeah. And ironically, you give him one of the great moments of the film, which is when he takes the hand off and he becomes he shows he's the mutant, which is an awesomely well shot scene. Yeah.
So Quaid goes into the Hilton, goes to the front desk.
Well, nice to have you back with us, Mr. Brubaker. Would you like the same suite?
Oh, definitely.
And then we find out he's left something in his safe. So they do a little thumb scanner, which is kind of cool. And he brings out this box. By the way, it's funny. The last movie John and I did also had people leaving things in safety deposit boxes because that was Sexy Beast.
Sexy Beast, yeah.
And at first we think this box is open, and then he tilts it, downslides this flyer that says "Last Resort," and on the back it says "For a good time, see Melina." And I love these are the little details that make movies good to me, which is that the clerk has come back. He has to borrow his pen, and below the word Melina, he writes Melina, and we see that it is in the exact same handwriting, which means that he left the note for himself.
And this scene, we talked about it a bit in the last episode, is so Hitchcock.
Totally.
This is like there's already been elements throughout the movie, but like right down to his name being Mr. Brubaker. Like you could I was like, is this North by Northwest? Like there is everything about this construction, right down to the fact that the desk here looks like it would look in a Hitchcock film. Like one guy who looks just like that behind the desk and giving him little pauses, telling him where he's got to put his finger for the ID, and everyone's a little suspicious, but things are still proceeding along as though everything's normal. It's one of the great joys of this movie is that it's totally fine with this being like, yeah, we're just going to have a Hitchcock scene in here, and this is it, and it's not really followed up on. That Melina thing is not really followed up on, other than it is what it was. He knows his handwriting put that there in the first place.
I didn't think about it when you brought it up before, but man, it would have been so cool if Alfred Hitchcock had read some Philip K. Dick stories in the late 50s or early 60s. Because a Hitchcock Philip K. Dick movie, they sync up perfectly.
Yeah.
In terms of what do we know and what do we not know, and the tension around, all these processes. Like, Hitchcock would have had a ball doing one of these films.
Oh my God. A sci-fi Hitchcock.
Oh my God. Yeah. That would be so cool. So he's back outside. This time he does get in the cab with Benny. And as soon as they get in there, there's gunshots.
What the hell was that? An accident?
That's the rebels, man!
Well, what do the rebels want?
All the usual. More money, more freedom, more air.
And they drive off into this tunnel. And this is the scale of this film. And I didn't understand this until I was in one of the behind the scenes things. But so they're shooting in this movie studio in Mexico, where it sounds like they've taken over half the studio. They've built on multiple stages, these huge, huge sets. So then they wanted these tunnels where we could drive through. What they did, they literally built these tunnels between the giant sets, between the giant sound stages. So when they're driving, they're leaving one giant sound stage, driving through a tunnel across the, backlot on the Mexican studio and directly into the set on another soundstage.
Wow.
I've never heard of anything like that.
Yeah, and they're also able to drop a little information in these shots because you see these giant, digging machines as they drive by them. So it's, again, little bits of information that they dole out.
Yeah. And those are called a mole, by the way. That's the name they had for them. And we come out into our new set, and this is Venusville, which is obviously based on, red light district in like Amsterdam. And then we see all of these mutants. Well, the mutants and telepathy, ESP, that's all stuff that came out of the David Cronenberg versions of the script.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which totally makes sense to me. And you could also see like, as we go along through all these versions, different things get locked in, even though the people that created those things are no longer on the project.
Yeah.
And then we see this, mutant woman and her daughter. Again, these are all designed by Rob Bottin. And by the way, the way some of this came about, he went up to Verhoeven and said, so what do you want? What do these things look like? And Verhoeven said, I don't know, just do something weird. And Paul Verhoeven says that Bob got a very crazy look in his eye and said, how weird.
I bet I can guess your birthday.
What is it?
You're a Taurus, right?
How did you guess?
And then Arnold very tenderly touches her face.
Okay, put a pin in that little gesture there. I'm not going to say anything about it right now, but I want to bring it up again later, and I want it to be in the memory. That little moment, that little moment that Arnold has with the little girl.
Tell me something. Are all psychics
freaks? Afraid so, man. It goes with the territory.
Does that mean that all people with mutations are psychic, or just that all people who are psychic have mutations?
I took it to mean that it is the one benefit of getting this horrible radiation inspired mutation.
So is Benny psychic?
That would be probably the conclusion.
Well, he certainly shows up when you least expect him near the end of the movie.
Yeah.
So maybe.
Second question. And this is just a dumb, geeky question, but I'm curious of how this little girl's ESP works. Because so she figures out his birthday, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, is that Quaid's birthday or is that Hauser's birthday? And the reason I asked the question is because there's two. I know this is ridiculous, but this is the Cine-Files and it's a ridiculous show. But here's the thought that occurred to me: is if I have ESP and I could either be reading your mind, like you think of your birthday, and because you have that thought, I read your mind and I know that that's your birthday. But what if you think of your birthday as a different day? Because
it's got to be Quaid's. It's got to be Quaid's birthday then, as programmed by whoever created Quaid. Because the whole point of this plan, as we're going to find out, is so the mutants can't read Hauser's mind. right? So it would be incumbent upon the programming to be so thorough, it so completely envelops the brain that's inside this Hauser casing that it has now created Quaid, who has his own birthday and knows it with his full soul. So that when the mutant girl tries to read his mind, she reads Quaid's birthday, not Hauser's.
I think you made this actually more important than I thought it was. Yes, you're right. It has to be. It has to be that. And then what we hear too is that the reason all these mutations happen is because Cohaagen was too cheap to build good shielding, and the radiation and thin air is what caused all this stuff. And then I love the little bit where Benny tries to steer him to a different club where he gets a kickback.
Yes.
Not that I've ever experienced anything like that, of course. We go into Last Resort, which is the Total Recall version of a den of scum and villainy, I think. Although very well lit. Goes to the bar, asks for Melina.
Well, she's busy. But Mary here, she's free.
And there we see Lycia Naff, who is the three-breasted woman.
Yeah.
And I will just say, as a, I was 21 when this movie came out, and certainly there were certain images in certain kinds of film that certainly attracted my viewership at certain points in my life.
Yeah.
She also, by the way, played Ensign Sonia Gomez on Next Generation, who is a very beloved character. And here's the thing about this. She is not naked, okay? She is clothed, and she's wearing a three-breasted, prosthetic on top of her body. It was so embarrassing for her to do the scene, both in the scene, because even though she's not actually naked, everyone is responding to her like she's naked. So everyone is constantly staring at her. She feels like she's walking away naked. And then over the years, that became who she was known as. So she got a lot of attention from a lot of creeps, a lot of letters from people in prison, a lot of people saying, we know how men are and what has been revealed. And this was not a good thing for her in her life. Yeah. And what I found really interesting is, do you want to know, in addition to acting, what other profession she went into? She became a journalist. And one of the things she was investigating was incidents of sexual harassment with a star named Bill Cosby.
Wow.
And I find it fascinating that I don't know that she consciously channeled this experience that she had into this kind of investigation, but I do think it's cool that she, went and started fighting the good fight.
Yeah.
Well, it is a fascinating thing just in the sense of, at modern productions and the requirements of intimacy coordinators, that there's a lot of talk about, what's necessary, what's not necessary. And this is a case study in it where it's necessary just by the story suggestion that someone is being overtly sexual, being naked, even if they physically are not. That is a mental head trip. Yeah. And it requires sensitivity, care. I don't want to cast aspersions on anyone involved in the production of Total Recall, but I am going to guess that kind of sensitivity and care was not there. So that's a pretty, I don't mean to undercut her terrible experience, but I do think it's quite interesting that, an experience like that happened in a case where the person was physically covered and yet was still kind of left to feel as vulnerable and mistreated as someone who wasn't.
Yeah, and there's a number of elements to this one as well, because she said that she turned down an offer to go on Johnny Carson to talk about the film. And imagine that you're a small part of this massive film that is led by Arnold Schwarzenegger, but the embarrassment of what you did on the screen, for you, it causes you to turn down to go on Johnny Carson, which could have, elevated your career, got you into other situations possibly. And, and it's also a bit of a mind trip for her because, she got to know Paul Verhoeven when he was the cinematographer on Clan of the Cave Bear, which is a kind of forgotten Daryl Hannah film where she played her little sister. And so that's how they got to know each other, which is how she got the role. And also she said this in numerous interviews, because I also kind of looked her up, Steve, ahead of time. And she said that being ethnic back then, it was incredibly difficult to get work. And so if someone offers you a week on a major feature film, you're going to take it. And I just didn't know what it was going to be involved in, what it would lead to. So, it's just those things that you kind of don't see coming. But It's a tough business. It's such a tough business. And this is a woman who graduated cum laude from both her magna cum laude from her high school and college. So, you know, these are the situations. So the fact that she became a journalist isn't kind of a surprise when you think about how intelligent she seems to have been.
First of all, I had no idea Paul Verhoeven was the cinematographer on Clan of the Cave Bear. That is,
yeah.
That is a fascinating tidbit. And yeah, well, and the fact is, the three-breasted prostitute is one of the images of this movie. You know what I mean?
Well, 100%. Yes.
Like that's something that, and so it's a really weird thing to be like, this is a human being who came in for a few days work on a gig, and then this is a huge part of her life going forward.
Yeah.
But needless to say, Quaid is not into Mary and instead wants Melina and flashes a big stack of bills, and we call Melina over. And although we've seen her before, here we have our first real look at Melina, who I think is great in this film, by the way.
Yeah.
He walks over to her, and she is with Tony, who is played by Dean Norris.
Yeah, Hank.
Hank from Breaking Bad. I don't know that I would not have recognized him. I don't think.
No.
100% did not recognize him. Yeah.
And he's also with Michael Bell, who plays George, who, spoiler alert, is also Quato. And Michael Bell, another person. He's in Nightmare on Elm Street, Stand By Me, Twins. He's in all sorts of stuff. Seen him in tons of stuff.
Hello, Hauser. Still bulging, I see.
Another shot to the crotch. I do like this line.
What you been feeding this thing?
Blondes.
You got a lot of nerve showing your face around here, Hauser.
Look who's talking.
It's like this is like the stand-up routine section of the movie. He's just
totally
rapid fire.
It totally plays back into the Arnold as a guy who knows how to quip.
Yes.
You know? Yeah. So they head upstairs, and as they're heading up, we run into the name of the character is Thumbelina.
Yeah.
Not a big fan of that name. And this is Debbie Lee Carrington, who, would you like to know what Debbie Lee Carrington's first gig was?
Sure.
Unsurprisingly, her career started when she was, I believe, in high school, and she responded to an ad in the newspaper for a little movie called Under the Rainbow.
Oh, no.
Chevy Chase and Carrie Fisher, which is a movie for those people who don't know. I'm not sure that I recommend going to look at the trailer on YouTube.
Yeah.
I did, because here's what's funny. So I'm the oldest person here. So this movie came out, I think, in 81.
Yeah.
So I'm like 12.
Yeah.
And so I totally watched it and liked it because I didn't know that this was a terribly offensive movie.
Yeah.
Because I was 12.
Oh, Chevy.
I looked at the trailer. Oh my God, is this movie horrendous?
And I think, if I'm not wrong, Steve, because I'm only just a couple years younger, I remember renting this from the video store, and I think it features, and this is why I might remember it, a nudity scene with Carrie Fisher. I think it is.
Oh, really?
I think that's from what I can remember about it, but I'm not sure. And I for whatever reason that is stuck in my mind. Who knows if that's true? But yes, incredibly offensive, and it is set during that time, because it's set during the Wizard of Oz time.
The casting of the Wizard of Oz.
Casting Wizard of Oz. Yeah.
Weird
little film.
Debbie Lee Carrington's in tons of stuff. She's Return of the Jedi. She's Howard the Duck. She's in Seinfeld, Boston Legal, Child's Play, multiple Child's Play things. Titanic, Men in Black. Bride of Chucky. I mean, she's in lots and lots of stuff, and I like her. She's always fun whenever she's on screen.
You son of a bitch. You're alive. I thought that Cohaagen tortured you to death.
I guess he didn't.
And you couldn't get me a message? You never even wondered what happened to me?
So, to be clear, Hauser, undercover or somehow, met Melina, and while there's psychics everywhere, he did convince her that he loved her. Would you say that's true?
It seems it. And it seems like she's not a psychic, right? So
Right.
she's not a mutant, so she wouldn't know that. He probably was a high-level spy, right? So he had gotten as far as you possibly could. And this is going back to what you were asking about, do all the mutants have ESP?
Right.
And here's what I would say. probably, if they're saying yes, that's what you're told by the screenplay, but nothing says they all have the same level of it, right? So there's probably it's probably like a firewall, right? Like you're getting through certain levels of okay, I avoided my mind being read by this group of people and then by this group of people, but then there's like the highly expert ones, which Quato is the top level, he's the highest level psychic, and somebody's gonna find you out, right? And that seems to be why, what we find out later, they hatch this cockamamie scheme that they're going to use the, brain-wiped Quaid to get around this security system.
Well, and clearly Tony, who is a mutant, doesn't trust Hauser, but obviously hasn't read through him.
Right.
That's not possible.
Well, and the other thing I want to point out here and ask of you guys, that I had never really thought of this until recently, is Melina even a sex worker?
That is a great
question.
Watching it this time, I kind of came down on the side that she's not, that the whole place is a cover, right? Yeah. I mean, and there are sex workers there, obviously, but then that's why the bartender is like, she just sticks with her regulars, right? And then when the guy flashes a lot of money, it's like, well, we better let her know something's going on over here. And then she turns and sees who it is, which I would also think maybe the bartender's knew what he doesn't know. He doesn't remember this guy that comes in sometimes and asks for Melina. But yeah, I got the feeling watching it this time that the entirety of The Last Resort is a cover for the Rebel alliance, and that she's just one of the main soldiers involved, and uses the brothel as a cover.
It also goes into the demure sleazy thing, because for the dream, the way she's if we're in a dream, the way she's presented here is perfect, which is that she's demure entirely, but she is linked to being a sex worker that we never see. And the other thing, it's like there's always the Madonna whore complex, and demure sleazy lines up perfectly with it. And it just occurred to me, just as you were talking, Brendon, that is the perfect example of demure sleazy is Pretty Woman. Pretty Woman is an entire movie based on the concept of this person is a sex worker, but we never see her behave in any way like that.
Right.
So we can really like her, but have this sleazy thing connected to her that makes her more sexually attractive,
Right, because she's a new sex worker. When we starting at the movie, she's like being convinced by her friend to do this, and it just happens to work out. So she never really gets to be considered sleazy because she's not a veteran sex worker. So we have this connection to her that's different. But the fact that she's connected to something that might have been deemed sleazy back then, I'm not trying to shame anyone. You make a good point here. And the thing with Rachel Ticotin and how the outfit is very covered up for a sex worker, right? Like there's it would take a lot of time to get her out of that clothes to have sex with her. So
also athletic. It's all stretchy. She can do karate in these clothes. It's like that was part of his specifications.
Right, exactly. So you see that with this, and I love that Arnold. I mean, it's kind of interesting as an action hero. There weren't a lot of, and we just talked about Lydia Naff and the idea of being ethnic. I mean, Rachel Ticotin and Maria Conchita Alonso, two Latina actresses, are his partners in these films. And so I think it's fantastic to see this as a change of pace for these action movies, because I don't think Stallone ever really had an ethnic counter during this time, so I think that's great to see in something like this.
So she's now essentially forgiven him, is kissing him, and he's trying to interrupt by saying that he doesn't remember her. And at first she doesn't believe him, and then he finally says,
I don't remember you. I don't remember us. I don't even remember me.
What, did you get amnesia? How did you get here?
Hauser left me a note.
Hauser, you're Hauser.
Not anymore. Now I'm Quaid.
Which is a pretty weird, it's weird. It's a pretty weird plan. And then he makes the mistake of mentioning that he has a wife. He says, did you say you have a wife? Are you fucking married? He says, no, she's not really my wife. And I love that he finally says, look, forget I said wife. And now she's convinced that he's lying to her.
Why would I lie to you?
Because you're still working for Cohaagen.
Which he is. Yeah. And he points to his head and says,
He says there's enough in here to nail Cohaagen for good.
Get out.
You got to help me remember.
I said get out.
Selena, please.
And she pulls out her gun and says, get out. And he goes, all right. And he leaves. We're back in the hotel room. He's watching a news report where Cohaagen is saying terrible things about the rebels. And then we hear a knock.
Mr. Quaid?
What?
I need to talk to you about Mr. Hauser.
Who are you?
Dr. Edgemar from REKALL.
This is like the most fascinating scene in the movie to me.
Yeah.
By the way, in casting, Paul Verhoeven said he was looking for a guy who could be both meek and strong, who was both nerdy and charismatic.
Wow.
And I think that's what he got.
He got him.
I'm asking for too much.
Yeah.
I'm afraid you're not really standing here right now.
You know, Doug, you could have fooled me.
I'm quite serious. You're not here, and neither am I.
That's amazing. Where are we?
At REKALL. You're strapped into an implant chair, and I'm monitoring you from the psychoprobe console.
We have established what these two ideas of reality are, and now they are colliding in this scene.
You gotta look at it, and it's fascinating to get you guys' thoughts on this. The construction of it, of a script here and of the movie here, just when we're with Quaid now, we've gone through the screen, he's escaped this thing, he's now met up with Melina, and Tony's there, so there's a crew here, all this kind of stuff. So now, when he's been rejected by Melina and these people, he is essentially like, what do I do now? And boom, at the perfect time, shows up the REKALL people with, of course, Sharon Stone here in a second. I think it's fascinating for us as the audience, right? We're like, well, what is he going to do? Oh, this shows up. What does this do to kind of propel the story along? And it's perfect timing to bring him in right at this moment in the construction of the film.
Well, and also because a lesser film and a lesser screenplay would think that the most tantalizing thing for the audience is for them to have this pull on them through the film as to whether or not it's a dream, right?
Yeah,
like
right.
as if you're gonna get to that Shyamalan style twist at the end, right?
Yeah.
And you know, a lesser film would bank on that being the engine of people's interest in it. This movie knew that is so obvious as a choice.
Right.
That by concealing it for too long, you almost are playing too cute. And so it just lets it out right here. It unplugs the valve that is holding that bit of secret tension in. And it's like, okay, now we're just going to talk about it. Now the cards are on the table. Either this is a dream or it's reality. And we're not going to let you play around as though you're going to figure this out at the end.
Right.
And I think that's what makes this work so well. And on top of that, just like when he's in the REKALL office, this Dr. Edgemar will now proceed to tell him the narrative of what is to come. Yeah. So again, like, you know, that Bill Paxton scene of showing the Titanic breaking down bit by bit before it actually happens. You know, this is a perfect story engine for the next hour of the film to keep it from feeling not so predictable, but at the same time, allowing a mass audience to feel satisfied by what they're watching.
Yeah. It's a great point, because what you're describing is it's sort of it's the difference between a movie with a twist, like The Sixth Sense, where you travel through the entire movie totally satisfied and entertained by what's going on, and then realize that something is completely different from what you expected. And a movie that is a mindfuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This movie is a mindfuck. This movie is you're continually throughout, wait, what does that mean? Like, what is happening throughout the whole thing? That's part of the whole experience. And yes, you can go back and watch it again.
Yeah.
But it isn't just, oh, now I know the reality is different. You never know the reality.
Exactly. Just every time you think you've got it figured out, something else happens that makes you question the solid ground you were just standing on, which is great. Yeah.
That being said, I think I have it all figured out, which I'll get to in a moment. By the way, Brendon, you've mentioned Hitchcock several times. In this scene in particular, Paul Verhoeven was thinking about Hitchcock. He was like watching, I think he said Dial M for Murder, and there were several other movies, like the conversation scene, the low angles, how you get the exposition out. He very much was trying to film this like Hitchcock.
What you're experiencing is a freeform delusion based on our memory tapes, but you're inventing it yourself as you go along.
What if it is my delusion? Who the hell invited you?
I've been artificially implanted as an emergency measure.
So he's at his control panel in the lab, putting himself into this to try to interfere with this, what he calls a schizoid embolism.
This is tremendous science fiction, by the way. Like if you just think about the Philip K. Dick short, as inventive as that is about the idea of the buried memory and the mind implant, this takes it even one step further of this idea that the mind implant went wrong and the subject is now creating the story as he goes along. And so it is incumbent upon the lab to be inserting additional information into his delusion to try and help him out of it. That's fantastic science fiction.
Paul Verhoeven said a fascinating thing at this point, which is that he said that the audience that they don't know it, but in the choice between a movie that is a huge adventure about a spy fighting battles and a movie in which a dude is sitting in a chair, unconscious, having a psychotic break, we want to be in the adventure movie. Yeah. We don't want to be in the movie where the reality is that this is all a dream.
That is so important because now I'm just realizing that is why you unplug that valve, right? You release that pressure because if you have an audience sitting there for another hour worried about the fact that they're going to get to the end of this and it's going to all be a dream, that's disappointing. And they don't want that. They want it to be real. So you tell them here at the 1 hour mark, hey, you know that thought you had about it might be a dream? That's as active a thing as the actual adventure you're going on, right? It's not going to come as a surprise. It might just be that this is a terrible horror going on right now for this character who's trapped in his own mind. It is not going to be a twist for you at the end. I think that's really important.
Well, and it does this crazy magic trick, which is the job of a filmmaker is we want to get the audience on the main character's side. We want them with them. We want them motivated to get the things they're motivated to get. And in this case, we are with the main character in rejecting a reality that we don't want it to be because he doesn't want it to be that reality.
Right.
That's not like any other movie. No other movie works that way, but this one does.
Think about it. Your dream started in the middle of the implant procedure. Everything after that, the chases, the trip to Mars, the suite at the Hilton, are all elements of your recall holiday and ego trip. You paid to be a secret agent.
And Arnold is rejecting it.
And what about the girl? Brunette, athletic, sleazy, and demure? Just as you're specified. Is that coincidence?
She's real. I dreamt about her before I even went to recall.
Mr. Quaid, can you hear yourself? She's real because you dreamed her.
That's right.
That is a great line. Yeah. And then he says, I got something else to convince you. And we open up the door, and there is Laurie. She's in a blue outfit. Her hair is really done.
Well, I suppose you're not here either.
I'm here at Recall. I love you.
And there's no trace of the Laurie that tried to kill him from the earlier scene in this person at all.
Right.
She's affectionate and, attentive and all of those things. And Quaid's not buying anything.
Bullshit.
What's bullshit, Mr. Quaid? That you're having a paranoid episode triggered by acute neurochemical trauma? Or that you're really an invincible secret agent from Mars who's the victim of an interplanetary conspiracy to make him think he's a lowly construction worker?
I think he makes an excellent point. And you can see that Quaid is wavering a little bit. And he says what he wants him to do. And this is I'm sure I had the same reaction that you did, is that he goes, I want you to swallow the red pill. And I just went, holy shit.
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything about them referencing Total Recall in the Matrix, but man, swallowing the red pill to return to a different reality, that's right there. And he takes the pill and he puts the gun to his head and says,
let's say you're telling the truth and this is all a dream. Then I could pull this trigger and it won't matter.
Okay, there are two realities here, right? One reality is that it is all a dream and he can pull the trigger and it won't matter. Another reality is that somehow Laurie and Dr. whatever his name is. Edgemar were brought to Mars, I assume by Cohagen, and this is a real guy in this room, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if that's the case, first of all, Dr. Edgemar is doing a great job and he now has a gun to his head. He's got nerves of steel.
Yes.
And second of all, and we'll get into this, it makes no sense whatsoever why Cohagen would bring Dr. Edgemar and set up this scene at all. This doesn't make any sense to me at all. But anyway.
Well, wait, it doesn't make sense why he would do it? Like if it's just about knocking the guy out so that he can take him without him getting killed and take him back to the lab so that he could replace his brain with Cohagen, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Wait. What do you mean? But he still needs him to get. So hold on. What do you think Cohagen's plan at this moment is?
I think it's bailing, right? He's like, we're too. This is getting screwed up. This guy's gonna get killed. I'm gonna get my friend Hauser killed, right? Which is the thing he does not want, and he's thinking, I got to get him out of here. And it would be where, you know, when the plan doesn't work with the actual pill, but what you're about to talk about is that Arnold does wind up being unconscious, and he's being dragged out of there, not killed, but dragged out of there by Cohagen's people, by people associated with the agency, police or whatever. And so where are they taking him? What are they going to go do with him? I can only imagine that this is a moment for Cohagen of regrouping, because everything else up until this point hasn't worked. And he knows, because he's got Benny and other people spying on Quaid, he knows that it hasn't worked for Quaid to go reintegrate with the mutants, which is the whole point. She's kicked him out. She doesn't trust him. She doesn't buy this whole thing. So I just interpret this as the ripcord. We're getting this Quaid plan to its finality, and we're going to get Hauser back, and then we'll move on from there.
You know what? I really hadn't thought about it that way, and I think you're right, and I am wrong. I think it never occurred to me that Cohagen is bailing, that he's worried about his old friend Hauser, that he doesn't think this is going to work. He's failed to make contact with Melina, and so he's just trying to he's come up with a solution to pull the plug. Well, I never had that thought before, because to me it's like, if you want Quaid to go forward, Dr. Edgemore showing up is screwing there's no reason for Dr. Edgemore to tell these things to Quaid if he wants Quaid to go forward. But if he doesn't want Quaid to go forward, then you make a great point.
Here's my counter. Okay. And this is where it gets real fascinating. Because, first of all, Steve, I don't think there's right or wrong. I think we all just interpret this right, because the approach and how we have. But it could be possible that this is all Cohagen set up to make sure that he is deep in the Quaid mindset. Because in the end, it does lead to it does lead to them killing Kuato, that Benny's in that room with them and kills Kuato. So in essence, him being this deep into believing that he is this freedom fighter, and he's against Cohagen, is what ends up leading him into this moment.
Maybe this is a stress test on the fact that he just saw it fail with Melina, right?
Right.
So he's like, we got to make sure that this is actually going to go as far as we want it to go.
Melina and Tony and all of them have just rejected him.
That's right.
So
that's I like that.
To bring him back. And so maybe this is as you said, stress test there.
Well, also, and I just thought of this, what gives credence to your theory on this is that we didn't see it, but we know Cohagen sat Richter down and said, I got a plan to unfuck everything you fucked.
Yes.
So this could be it, to say like, look, we're gonna really drive this guy into the Quaid.
And clearly he's had Benny lined up as a plan C or plan D in the whole situation by making him this aggressive taxi driver that's driving him to these places. And if we look at Benny's clearly been touching base with Cohagen about what's going on. And Richter has no idea that Benny is part of the plan.
Right.
So he's got all these different pieces on the chessboard that he's moving around to surround the queen eventually.
Right.
I am sold by this theory, and I'll just add a small bit to it, which is that Cohagen clearly doesn't care about Dr. Edgemore.
Nobody.
It was a big move. He had to fly the dude from Earth to pull off the plan, I think. Yeah. But the other thing is that I like the idea of a stress test, because if Quaid is shaky and Dr. Edgemore can bring him in, then he wasn't going to do a good job anyway.
Right.
And if Quaid kills Dr. Edgemore because Cohagen doesn't care, then that solidifies him in the position where people are going to trust him, because now he's fighting against these other guys.
100%.
What he told Richter doesn't make any sense to me at all, because again, Richter's going to come in guns blazing, but that's beside the point. So he's put the gun to Edgemore's head, who, again, nerves of steel.
It won't make the slightest difference to me, Doug, but the consequences to you would be devastating.
But then what he says is that if you kill me, you're going to be stuck in permanent psychosis. And then this next speech is kind of amazing.
The walls of reality will come crashing down. 1 minute, you'll be the savior of the rebel cause, and the next thing you know, you'll be Cohagen's bosom buddy. You'll even have fantasies about alien civilizations, as you requested, but in the end, back on Earth, you'll be lobotomized.
It is the whole movie.
Yeah.
You know?
It's a great delivery, too.
And he puts the gun down, tells him to take the pill, puts the pill in his mouth, says, swallow it. Laurie's encouraging him. He looks at her. And then we cut to his POV of Dr. Edgemore. First, it's in a single, which I'm really glad they didn't do the close-up first. It's in a single, and you can see just barely that little drip of sweat.
Yeah.
He looks more closely. Then we get the closer shot of the sweat drop. That is just and again, it's very Hitchcockian. Just a perfect little detail.
Yeah.
And he shoots him in the head. And there's a huge music hit. And the moment he shoots in the head, in comes the bad guys.
Now you've done it!
They attack him. He gets knocked down. By the way, Arnold broke his finger during this fight scene.
Oh, wow.
Oh, this is the part where he broke his finger? Oh, wait, there were a couple of hand injuries he had, because we talked about that other one with the glass.
Yeah, he cut his hand earlier, broke his finger here. Laurie stands over him, kicks him in the face.
That's for making me come to Mars. You know how much I hate this fucking planet.
Which brings up another question. So Laurie must have known Hauser, right?
I'm not sure. What makes you think she knew him?
Well, she's in a relationship with Richter, who obviously knows Hauser.
Right.
I guess you're right. As a wife, she also told him, but she's never been to Mars, so how would she hate that planet? The only way that I'm kind of going back and forth about it, because she certainly told Quaid she didn't want to go to Mars, so maybe that's what she's referring to.
I just took it as like that it was not a big leap for her in her acting to tell him, let's not go to Mars, I don't like it there, that she legitimately did not like it. And so now, real Laurie is telling him, I've told you all along, I didn't like coming here. I was telling you the truth.
She calls to Richter, says she got him. They're dragging him to the service elevator. And then the door opens and Melina's there, who opens fire. And we get into a really nice fight between Laurie and Melina.
Yeah. I think there was rumors, Steve, did we cover in the first episode that Cynthia Rothrock was being looked at as a possibility for this movie?
I did not know that rumor.
Oh, okay. I think I read that in one of the trivia things on IMDb. And so her being a part of this movie, when you see a scene like this, makes all the sense in the world, to have her be a part of this and have a great fight scene here with Rachel Ticotin would have been really interesting, or make her the Rachel Ticotin character go toe to toe with Sharon Stone. But I thought this was great. And there weren't a lot of female action fight scenes in mainstream American films. So to have this pop up in the middle of this film here, I thought was awesome. And the choreography, you can see the beats where they're supposed to be, but it's still a damn good choreographed fight between them. So
I think for this era of American movies with a sort of martial arty scene, this one's really good. Yeah. It's mostly both of them. I think for some of the flips and stuff, then one of them is a stunt person and the other person is the actor. But I think they did really well. Laurie grabs Melina by the hair, is pulling out a knife, and Doug shoots the knife away. And immediately Sharon Stone turns on a dime and says,
Doug, you wouldn't hurt me, would you, sweetheart? Sweetheart, be reasonable. After all, we're married.
Verhoeven says it was this moment in this scene that made him realize she could do Basic Instinct.
Oh.
Yeah, the turning on a dime was
that
his,
makes
was
so
his
much
thing.
sense.
Yeah. And as she's saying this, we see that she is reaching for her gun, and Quaid kills her and says,
"Consider that a divorce."
And so Quaid still has memories of a courtship, a marriage, honeymoon, friends, and he just killed this person. Does he have any feelings about it?
Oh, killing Laurie?
Yeah.
I don't think he gives a shit.
I don't think he does.
Not at this point.
He doesn't at all.
He's fully bought into the whole story, so he thinks, okay, I might have those memories, but they're not real, so I don't need to honor them.
Right. And these two deaths back to back at Quaid's hand show you that he still has the muscle memory of being a spy. Those are two pinpoint dead center headshots.
Yeah.
Not to mention the shot where he shot a knife out of a person's hand with no further injury to that person.
Great point. Yes, that's an even harder shot to pull off. Yes, so clearly he's because I mean, Melina shows up and she's just like all over the place, and Quaid is much more precise in his shots.
Yeah,
you know, and so yeah,
I just keep going to like the description that we had of being sold on Recall, that the memories will be as clear and perfect as your own memories. Yeah. And so you have the memory of the night you proposed to Lori and the first date and the wedding and meeting the parents and all, Romain, and you just shot that person in the head. And those memories remain just as clear and real to you as any of your other memories.
But there's clearly no time for trauma in the world of Total Recall.
Agreed. Very true. Agreed.
I thought he didn't like me.
If Cohagen wants you dead, it might be okay.
Which actually is perfectly lines up to what you guys were saying about why have this scene, is this is setting up to put them in the right position for them to trust him.
Yeah.
And they head off. Richter shows up, sees dead Lori, obviously has a reaction to it. They're running along. They have to jump off of the scaffolding towards this window. Crazy Mike, the henchman, whose I think name is Helm, is chasing them. And he spots them and is about to fire, but chooses not to fire. And then Richter comes running out, ready to open fire at the giant glass dome, and he stops him at the last minute.
He does get a shot off, too.
Gets a shot off. Yeah. So,
of course he does.
somehow, when Michael Ironside runs into his henchman, he hit him so hard or fell or something that he broke several ribs and cracked his sternum.
That's the part. I knew he cracked his sternum, but it was from that part.
It's from this, apparently.
What?
Yeah. So this was
crazy Mike indeed, man.
Yeah, this is a major injury. I don't understand how you can bump into someone and have that kind of injury. He must have fallen or hit something else. I don't quite know what happened. But they had to pause all the filming because the way the schedule had been set up is it was almost all Richter from this point forward in the schedule. They
no fight with Arnold yet.
Wow. Yeah. And so they had to pause filming. He's really injured. It was a while that they were paused. And then here's the stories. There's another one I'll tell you later on. Here's the stories that I heard. They make no sense to me whatsoever, but these are the stories that I heard, which is that insurance would not insure Michael Ironside coming back on the set until he could prove that he could do 50 push-ups. And I'm like, most humans cannot do 50 push-ups. 50 push-ups is not a requirement for being on a movie set. This makes no sense to me at all. And yet I heard this repeated multiple times from multiple sources.
Let me tell you why I believe it.
Okay.
Arnold Schwarzenegger told the guys that they approved the insurance. He said, don't approve it.
Yes.
Until he can do 50 push-ups because I want to fuck with him. And that makes so much Arnold Schwarzenegger 1990 sense.
Although apparently he hurt himself way more doing the 50 push-ups. So if he was trying to just screw with him as a man, he screwed with him as a production.
Exactly. Which if they ever found out, Ironside would have a massive lawsuit. But I wouldn't be surprised if Arnold didn't.
You have totally made this make sense to me because the thing, this is what's happening with if a movie gets halted and insurance gets called in, they are outlaying millions of dollars because of the stoppage of shooting, because they've got to pay off for the sets, they got to pay off all the salaries, everything. There's no way they want Ironsides back as quickly as possible, but. Your story, John, it makes perfect sense.
I mean, what quack doctor with thick Coke bottle glasses and a cigarette hanging out of the side of his lip goes, you know what, make him do 50 push-ups and then we'll give him insurance for the sternum. Like, there's no doctor that would be like, yeah, that's how you prove it. Let him do 50 push-ups and his sternum is fine. Like, it makes no medical sense.
No sense at all. So they managed to get away. They're running, of course, who do they run into? Coincidence? But Benny. Jump into the car. They're driving through these tunnels, being chased by the bad guys, lots of gunfire, evading one of these mole drilling machines. And it's a decent action sequence through the tunnels, but no reason, I think, to go into too much detail. We end up back at Last Resort. They run into the club, and immediately Tony opens up the secret door. And I love how they, set up the table and get it all hidden right before the bad guys show up. And Mary, sweet, lovely Mary, comes up to be a distraction.
You want to have some fun?
Where are they?
What are you talking about? I don't know.
And Richter takes a step back and shoots her.
In the back.
It's terrible.
Villain.
By the way, Dean Norris does a very nice kick to disarm Richter. And then they just open fire. And this is where the body count of this movie is ridiculous.
Yeah.
We're just killing people everywhere. I like, by the way, that Thumbelina stabs Helm and gets rid of Crazy Mike for us. I like her moment with that.
That was one of the scenes that contributed to the X rating, apparently. That she like vivisects him, like his guts spilled out with that that stab, and they had to cut that shot.
Richter here, we've got them pinned down.
Stop fighting and pull out.
But they've got Quaid, they're protecting him.
Perfect. Get out of Sector G, now. Don't think. Do it.
Yeah. And they all pull out. And after they're gone, the big giant fan that we've established as part of Venusville slows down, and everyone in Last Resort comes out to look, including that cute, mutant girl and her mom. And the music is very somber. And little girl looks up at her mother as slowly the air is seeping out of Venusville. And I wrote down, man, Cohaagen is a really bad guy. I think it's totally bizarre. We're in these tunnels and we come up on catacombs, and Paul Verhoeven saw this as a metaphor for Christians being hunted by the Romans, which is why he built these catacombs. This one misses me.
Listen, we don't all think about the Roman Empire all the time. Jesus. Madness.
And there's this weird moment where Benny goes,
Hey, I think my grandpa might be here.
I would have cut that out of the movie. I don't understand that.
Weird.
But what we hear is that Quato is going to make Quaid remember some things.
Like what?
All sorts of things. Like maybe you'll remember that you loved me.
I don't need Quato for that.
Since when?
And they kiss.
The kiss with a rotting mutant immigrant corpse over their shoulder.
Yep.
Which then gets moved out of the way. It's very much in the focal point because it needs to get moved out of the way by a guerrilla fighter.
Just as this happening, guns show up and they have guns on Benny.
Who's this?
He helped us get away.
Hey, don't worry about me, man. I'm on your side.
And he pulls out that crazy arm. It's really cool, by the way. I like Benny's arm a lot.
And it's shot fantastically.
Yes.
Like with the light from behind.
The J.J. Abrams flair. Yeah.
If we don't hand you over, everybody in the sector will be dead by morning.
Well, then we don't have much choice, do we?
We can't turn him in.
That's up to Quato.
So they go through the door. Quaid sits down, asks about Quato. We hear more about the pyramid mines, where they found something, which again is referring to this alien artifact.
Cohaagen's big secret is buried in that black hole you call a brain. And Quato's gonna dig it out.
You're Quato, right?
Wrong. Quato's a mutant. So don't get upset when you see him.
We built a long time to this Quato thing. And George steps away. Mark starts making some weird noises, opens up some shirt.
Weird.
Something weird's happening, and he turns back around, and there is Quato.
Quato looks great.
Yeah. That was my question. What are your thoughts on Quato?
Oh, 1,000,000% Quato. Pro Quato.
The build-up was paid off, because when Quato appears, you're like, I'm horrified and fascinated, and the name is perfect, and I'm totally intrigued to see what happens next. So the build-up to him was great, because the reveal was totally worth it.
Also, it's a testament to the movie that it is not such a crazy left turn.
Yeah,
right? Like there has been, like they have doled out enough, piece by piece, enough like crazy Martian lore and enough things that are visually fun, right?
Yeah.
Like the three breasts, and then, Benny's arm, and all these things that get you into this kind of playful feel. So now here's this one that's like crazy and shocking, but it doesn't put you off as a viewer, because they did such a good job leading up to this where you're like, I'm already bought in. I got bought in when we got to Venusville.
Yeah.
It's so funny because I think about The Thing, which Rob Bottin also did, and just like, and again, I really feel like there's some things that have been lost in movies. Like we used to have a bigger variety of movies, and one of them was just the joy of weirdness.
Creature features.
The creature, like here's a crazy creature, and I'm going to make this thing. And this one, it is so wild. Apparently, it's obviously a puppet. It took, I don't know, 8 hours to get this actor into this rig. He couldn't pee. I mean, this is these things are brutal. And then I couldn't get the number. Maybe it was 15 puppeteers to make this thing work that are attached to this guy, all hiding in the corners to like do all the different movements for this. It did win a special Oscar just for this particular design. And I think the voice is really well cast in being just the right amount of weird and odd.
It's him, right? It's Marshall Bell.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I love what Marshall Bell does here, because it's that kind of earthy guru type, and so it has that kind of air of like everything I say is super important type of thing. So you buy in as an audience. And Schwarzenegger, as you mentioned earlier, Steve, the Schwarzenegger doing these different roles. When he is in this moment and Quado is in front of him, it is almost like that fountain moment with Hugh Jackman where he's looking up in air and, the wind and the light is on him. He is absolutely transfixed and he surrenders himself immediately to Quado. And so there's a real honesty in just that short scene that he has with Quado there that I thought was great to see from him as an actor. So I thought, to me, I love this whole scene with the both of them. And open your mind. All of that stuff was just cool, man.
What do you want, Mr. Quaid? The same as you, to remember. But why? To be myself again. You are what you do. A man is defined by his action, not his memory.
I wrote down, discuss.
So I want to go back to that thing I said to put a pin in. Was Quaid being nice to that little girl. There's also a moment right when this action scene kicked off where they're running into the last resort and they have the speakeasy style tunnel that they're going to run into, and Tony is ushering them in, and he stops, Arnold does, Quaid, to say, "Thank you, Tony." And he lets him in, right? And we're going to see this again a couple scenes from now when we get the famous line, "You got what you want to give these people air." And again, the genuine open-heartedness of the Quaid character. Where did that come from? If you are thinking of what is Quaid, who is Quaid, right? If Quaid is AI, if he is an implant, why did they make him nice? Why did where did these things, these personality traits come in? Why were they necessary? And is he developing this along on his own accord, and an autonomous nature of this artificial intelligence to, as Quado is saying, be who he is by his actions, not by the artificial memories that are implanted in there? And you can apply that to actual Doug Quaid, if he's just a guy who went to a place to, pay for a memory implant. Well, this memory that they've implanted him with, where he's this, murderous secret agent, that does not have to supersede his nature as a good-hearted person, which he shows time and again in this thing, that he is a good guy and very likable, genuinely nice, likable guy. I think that's so important to the character and really to the meaning of the film.
I have so many thoughts about this, and I'm trying to figure out how to put them in order, because I think this is like, first of all, this is a huge nature versus nurture idea.
Totally.
Which is that, we're born with certain hardwiring, and then life programs us with various software, and our parents try to program us, and our experience programs us, and our traumas program us. And that affects how the hardware manifests itself in the world. But in this case, the experiences, the memories, the programming is false. Like, you never actually went through all of those things. And so what, to some degree, this is saying is that if we assume that Hauser was a bad guy and that everything that he said was true, then somehow those memories that were implanted in Quaid were enough to interact with his hardwiring and his DNA to flip him over from bad guy to good guy. Just by having the memory, even though the memories are ones he's not very happy about, which is another interesting idea, which is like, he's in an unhappy marriage. He doesn't like his job. He doesn't like his life. And yet those experiences lead him more likely to be a good guy than the experiences where he's Hauser and having a ball. That actually is leading him to be a bad guy. So now there's this weird connection between pleasure and evil. and suffering and good, which is very Christian in its own way. The other thing I was thinking about is like, if in general you ask, I have a kid, he's almost 13. I tell him all the time how important your actions are over your words. Like you could say you're going to do sort of stuff. Well, what are you actually going to do? How do you behave in the world? So in that sense, I really agree with it. But then I think of myself as to some degree a collection of my memory and my knowledge. And so if that isn't me, if you replaced all of my memories and knowledge with false knowledge and said to me, your memories don't matter, it's your actions that matter, I'd be like, no, you just robbed me of my entire identity because you took away my memories and my knowledge. So that's why I go like, this is like the crux of the movie to me, or the crux of the mindfuckery of the movie, I guess.
Well, and then we'll see it followed up on in a few scenes where he actually does have to make a conscious choice of which way to go. Do you go toward the appetites, toward the pleasure, or do you go toward your learned humanity and what you believe is the right path, even though it might not be the most pleasurable one? And he will have to choose as Quaid, and he does make a choice.
There's a possibility that they put this programming inside him so that he would be this ultra good, nice, caring, compassionate, empathetic person, and that he has taken that and gone even further with it. That's very possible. But what's the best way to hide a spy, killer, assassin is to make them a complete 180 of what they were so that no one would suspect it. What's the easiest way to be accepted into a rebel alliance is for the rebels who see themselves as fighting against a tyrannical overlord as the good guys to see a good guy here who is compassionate, caring, and all of that, right? And then you have to ask, well, Melina clearly has a good heart herself. So why would she give her heart to someone who isn't that way naturally? So there's all of that I think you have to factor into it all. He could naturally be going this way, or it could have been programmed in him, and he's just taking it to the next level. And it's not an accident that they highlight these moments when he's being good. And you can look at it from a career, like outside of the movie type thing. Okay, what's a way to change people's perception of Arnold in 1990? Oh, you have twins, and then you show him being this good guy, and then later we get Kindergarten Cop, and we get these others. So you're trying to change the perception of Arnold. So let's throw these quick scenes in. So as a career, it makes sense to throw those scenes in. But in the story overall, it also makes sense because of how you want the audience to care about this guy and his story. So you throw these little moments in so that subconsciously plants into your brain that this is a good person, and I'm in on the ride all the way to the end.
Quick digression that just occurred to me is that it suddenly occurred to me that if Arnold's career had never evolved from Conan, Terminator, Raw Deal, Commando, all those movies, and never done Twins, Kindergarten Cop, Total Recall, and all those movies, he would never have become governor.
Nope.
Oh, no.
100%.
That's the first thought. Second thought I had is that, so what's really weird about this, and I think this is true regardless of which reality is real, you have a character who rejects his boring life, kills his wife, kills his partner, kills his job, leaves his world in order to live the identity of the super spy. But he rejects, in the end, the identity of the super spy to keep the identity of the guy who lived the life that he rejected the life in the first place.
Sure.
So he stays Quaid, but rejects Quaid's life.
Yeah, well, because he ultimately really just wants to live the life he was dreaming about before he ever went to Recall.
Exactly, yeah. So he takes Quato's hands, camera pushes in, he keeps repeating, open your mind.
Open your mind.
The music, again, is beautiful. Really reminded me, by the way, of Goldsmith's score for Star Trek The Motion Picture when we discover V'ger. Very, very similar score to me. We're in this huge space. We see this walkway, and what we see is this flashback to something Hauser experienced with Cohaagen, where they're walking into the reactor. By the way, this reactor is one of the biggest special effects sets ever built. It's absolutely gigantic. Wow. And the way they designed it was they found, again, it's brutalism is the architecture recital. They found these skyscrapers they really liked, and so they flipped them upside down, and it's the skyscraper cityscape that is the reactor rods that are coming down rather than coming up. Huge, huge set that they built. And we start hearing from Richter talking about whatever this thing is and whether or not we should blow it up.
Don't be an idiot. We
can't risk it. The chain reaction could spread to all the turbinium on the planet. That means meltdown. A meltdown on a planetary scale.
Don't you think whoever built this thing thought of that?
Who knows what the hell they thought? They weren't human.
One thing we do find out is this is alien technology. It's like 500,000 years old. And we dissolve out of this back to Quato's eyes, and everything is shaking, and we find out they found us. And those giant mole machines crash through the walls. By the way, the camera very smartly cuts to Benny right when all this happens. You know, and these are the good details of when you watch the movie the second time, you know that Benny's betrayed them. You see all the details that they were setting up ahead of time.
Yeah.
And they're all running out, trying to escape or into the tunnels. And then they turn around, and Benny has a gun, and he shoots Quato.
Congratulations, Quaid. You led us right to him.
Do you think when you were 11, I know it was a long time ago, that you had any sense that Benny was going to turn on him?
No, definitely not. No, I had a sense that that George and Quado were going to bite it because they always, the shaman always does. But I never believed that it was Benny.
How can you do this? You're a mutant.
I got 4 kids to feed. So what happened to number 5?
So he can't even maintain his 5 kids lie. And there's Richter. And the last thing Quado says before Richter shoots him is,
"Start the reactor. Free Mars."
We are with Cohagen, who takes a look at Quado. And he calls Quaid a hero.
You see, Quaid, none of my people could get close to Quato. Fucking mutants could always sniff us out. So Hauser and I sat down and invented you. The perfect mole.
You know you're lying.
Hey, look, I put all these people to protect you. I set up the guy with the suitcase. I set up Benny.
Sorry. Too perfect.
Perfect my ass. You pop your memory cap before we can activate you? Richter goes hog wild, screwing up everything I spent a year planning. Frankly, I'm amazed it worked.
Me too.
Which, by the way, I'm totally sold on the scenario you guys laid out for the hotel room with Dr. Edgemore. Now that really, didn't make sense to me before. It totally makes sense to me now.
Well, Cohagen, I have to hand it to you. It's the best mindfuck yet.
And I think at this moment in the movie, we are not believing Cohagen. You know what I mean? If you're seeing it the first time.
Right. It's because it sounds so dumb.
It's totally ridiculous. There's no way they could have set all this up. It's impossible. And then he says, well, I have someone else who wants to talk to you. He goes, my mother?
If you're listening to this, that means that Quado is dead, and you have led us to him. I knew you wouldn't let me down. Sorry for that shit I've put you through, but hey, what are friends for? I would like to wish you happiness and long life, old buddy, but unfortunately, this is not gonna happen. You see, it's my body you've got there, and I want it back. So, adios, amigo, and thanks for not getting yourself killed.
Here's my question. How do you feel? I'll just say my opinion. Hauser is fucking nuts. I would never do this. This is the you are actually giving up your life to someone else and putting not you with your body in a life and death situation, and you might never come back at all. I think Hauser's plan is crazy.
Yeah, the whole thing is just ridiculous. But also, I guess knowing how kind of these guys under Cohagen's employ seem to be like almost kamikazes, right? Like they're just he's got Richter, who's just a wild free shooter. He's just going to kill anything in sight. You have to imagine that the murderous skills of Hauser were top notch, the greatest you could ever encounter. They've got some kind of strange ego narcissism that allows them to think they're invincible. I can come around pretty easily to the fact that as nuts as the plan is, Hauser thought we can make this work. This is a plan we're going to pull off.
But he's removing himself from his ability to make it work because he's no longer him with all his skills and knowledge.
Well, but he does wind up having all the skills and knowledge. Like we see that from the very beginning of the movie with
accident.
You're saying because he popped the memory cap?
Well, this is a good question. Would he still? It's actually an interesting question. If they didn't pop the memory cap,
he was going to be activated at some point. There was some point where they were going to actually activate Killer Hauser within the body of Quaid. right? Yeah. So at some point, and that's what he just said in that scene, you popped your memory cap before we could activate you. So at some point, whether it's after he had infiltrated the rebel base and gotten his mind read by Quado or whatever, at some point they were gonna like flip a switch, and this body of Quaid was going to become Killer Hauser and kill everybody.
Okay, still seems the plan's still crazy. I'll just
totally
leave it
crazy.
at that.
Of course, it's crazy.
I'll just leave it at that. Like I can't imagine going like I'm going to wake up, because when you wake up, so you have this memory erased. You still wake up the next day. You just don't remember any of the things you remembered yesterday, but it's still you.
Mm-hmm. No, but if you go by what happened to him in the recall office, where he was activated prematurely, he's Hauser and screaming that like there's no sense that he doesn't know the plan before that had happened before him. He, in that moment when he's in the chair freaking out and he's Hauser, he's telling them like, you screwed it up, you blew my cover, and like he's ready to kill everybody. And he says they're gonna come here and they're gonna kill all of you for doing this.
You know what's funny about this movie is, like, I think in general with great movies, most of the time, the more you dig in, the more you just find that works. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and with movies that are less good, the more you dig in, the more you go like, oh, well, why did they do that? And that doesn't make sense. And then the movie starts to fall apart. With this movie, the more I dig in, the more totally bewildered and confused I become. It's different. It's a different experience, but it actually is where it's supposed to be.
Yes.
You can't dig that far.
Full confusion. Yeah.
Yeah. Because it's literally this way lays madness.
Yes.
You know, that is what this is. They're dragging Arnold into a memory lab. I love the little details, like before it was Velcro restraints and now it's metal restraints. And he is fighting with everything you got. And we hear.
Relax, Quaid. You'll like being Hauser.
Guy's a fucking asshole.
Not true. He's one of my best friends. Besides, he's got a big house and a Mercedes. And you like Melina, right? Well, you get to fuck her every night. That's right. She's gonna be Hauser's babe.
It's a great bad guy plan. I'm giving you this gift. You're gonna love it. It's gonna be fantastic.
I'll bust his balls.
Princess. We're having you fixed. You're gonna be respectful, compliant, and appreciative. The way a woman should be.
And she spits in his face. Mm. Also, a very, very, just as he's like giving Quaid a gift in his mind that he won't remember, he's giving Melina a torture that she won't remember, you know? He gets a call, and we hear that the oxygen is bottoming out, and what should they do? And we see, and everyone on Venusville is now on the ground.
Fuck him. Be a good lesson to the others.
Come on, Cohagen, you got what you want. Give these people air.
My friend, in 5 minutes, you won't give a shit about the people.
And I love Richter's last moment.
Excuse me, doctor. Is he going to remember any of this?
Not a thing.
Oh, really?
And he punches him in the face. And you get what I think is definitely in the top 5 Arnold faces of all time.
Yeah.
I like to, as he's walking out, he says, oh, Quaid, I'm having a party tonight. Why don't you and Melina stop by? Remind him, Doc. And he heads out. So Quaid is fighting, and they're telling him, you know, it's only going to make things worse. It's only going to hurt. He's going to lobotomize himself. And Quaid manages to rip off the restraint, drives it into the technician's neck, starts taking out the other techs, grabs an axe, he blocks, and it's totally, I can totally see Vic Armstrong literally lifting a piece of choreography right from Conan.
Exactly. This is Conan's scene with an axe embedded in a dude's head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I love with the shot where it's sticking out of the guy,
yep.
You know, when he lets go of it. And he gets Melina out and says, are you all right? And I love the little twist for a moment. She says,
I'm not sure, dear. What do you think?
Then she kisses him and says, let's get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
I like, they run to like this elevator. He tosses her the axe. The doors open. They take out more guys. And again, I go, this is where this is totally like a video game, because for some reason they have guns in the elevator. You know what I mean? Like, it's totally like, well, you upgrade your weapons and you reload your ammo and you move on to the next level of the game.
You have to make a decision, sir.
And there's music build, and finally he says,
kill him.
And I think he's genuinely bummed about losing his good friend Hauser.
Well, not only genuinely bummed about losing a friend, on the commentary of this, Verhoeven hints very strongly, and it's very funny because like Arnold is either deliberately or obtusely not picking up what Paul Verhoeven is putting down here. But Verhoeven is like, basically like, I think they were lovers. Like,
oh
yeah, like
I missed that piece.
yeah, he's like, I don't know why he would react like this. If it was this whole movie, he was trying to prevent this guy from being killed, and now he has to kill him, and he's so upset. He's so upset. It must be something more than they're just friends. And Arnold's like, well, yes, he's upset because he knew him. And Verhoeven's like, or more than that. Like he keeps trying to get Arnold there, who is not coming along. But yeah, I think whether it was the intention in the screenplay or not, I think it's very much Verhoeven's idea as the filmmaker that like, oh yeah, these guys, this is why it was so important that you get through this with Hauser. They were lovers.
That is hilarious. And in a fit of pique, he kicks over his goldfish tank, and we see them all gasping for air on the ground. As of course we cut to the last resort, where all of the citizens there are also gasping for air.
That to me is, I thought that was stupid filmmaking, and I don't, Paul, whatever, but like, there's no need to really hammer that point home to fabricate a transition moment of him kicking that thing over, and then we see the fish grasping for air, then we go to the people grasping for air. I just didn't. I felt it was overkill.
Yeah, we knew at this point that those people had no air. Arnold just yelled it at the top of his lungs in 12 syllables. Air!
First of all, I totally agree. And second of all, my brain's kind of going, and that's where you think this movie is for?
Yes. It's not enjoyable, I guess, is what I would say. I don't mind over the top when it's enjoyable.
So Molina wants to head back to Venusville to try to save everybody, and Arnold wants to go to the reactor because the aliens built it, and he's convinced it can start air, and they're running to go there, and they hit a dead end, and then here comes Small Machine, and a voice becomes out of the drilling machine, and it is Benny, who's gone completely over the top insane. I don't know. This is to me too far. This whole kind of sequence.
Benny knew they would be there from his ESP or whatever. So yeah,
and him yelling, "I'm gonna drill you, sucker!"
Oh, I love all of Benny's lines in this scene. I know they like I know them like they were part of my wedding vows. Like it's such a like pro wrestling bad guy promo here.
Heel.
I'm gonna drill you, sucker.
I think you are absolutely right. And they're trying to fight back. Arnold's got a big drill. They both get kind of drills caught on their arms, and then he manages to drill through a hose, and stops Benny's machine from working. And then he goes, "Hey, Quaid, I'm gonna squash you." Can't find him, and then Quaid drills through the side of the mole and kills Benny while yelling, "Screw you."
Yes. Yeah. This was another scene cut for the X rating, when they were told it was too violent.
Yeah. Apparently Benny guts everywhere.
Yes.
But the great thing is this mole machine has managed to knock an opening into the reactor room. We go into this huge room.
This whole thing is one big reactor made out of titanium. And Cohaagen knows it makes air. The bastard won't turn it on.
And here comes Richter with the bad guys. They head into the reactor. Quaid walks in alone, and they all open fire on him. And then he stands up and starts laughing. And what I think is so great about this is the plant of the hologram was so long ago that I've forgotten about it at this point.
Yeah.
And then we realize that he is actually the hologram, and the image starts to buzz, and then the real Quaid comes up behind and fires at him. By the way, they open fired him standing in a complete circle.
Totally. Like they had killed each other dead.
They're all dead. Like
100%.
And really, even if he's not a hologram, you probably shouldn't fire at someone standing in a circle. John, you were in the military. I'm assuming that was part of the training.
Yeah, you don't shoot in a circle. Yes. That's basic logic.
Yeah. Again, we see him using the hologram, and then he walks out. I love that Arnold just walks out totally laughing, and they're all staring at him. They don't know what to do.
You think this is the real Quaid? It is.
Molina gets the hologram, and she does a little thing and gets more people killed. And then so we wipe most of the people out. Richter runs away, gets to the elevator, jumps on, and we get into a big fight.
Yeah.
This is Michael Ironside's first fight after the injury when he came back. He's really having trouble lifting his arm. And again, this story is crazy, and I don't entirely understand how it came about, but here's the story I understood. Is he wasn't really capable of lifting his arm, and they were working with a doctor, and that doctor happened to also be the physician for quarterback of the Oakland Raiders, Jim Plunkett.
Jim Plunkett, yeah.
And that he had actually specifically designed a brace for a very similar injury to go around the chest and maintain the sternum and the shoulder in stable position. And so, and it just, I guess, happened to be that Jim Plunkett and Michael Ironsides are relatively the same size. And so he's wearing Jim Plunkett's brace that was specifically designed for him while fighting Arnold in this scene.
Wow.
I think that's just wild.
Yeah. And that story comes up a lot. So I don't doubt it.
I think it's got to be true.
Yeah.
It is a really good fight. I think this is a really solid, sort of brutal back and forth fight. There's choking, there's elbows. Finally, he breaks Richter's arm, throws him off this elevator, or he manages to grab onto Quaid, who's trying to get rid of him. And Quaid looks up, sees the ceiling coming, the concrete ceiling coming down towards him and the shaft above. And he lifts him up so his arms are exposed.
Oh.
Richter sees what is about to happen, and then it hits, and his arms get ripped off. And Arnold is left holding the stumps.
See you at the party, Richter!
So first of all, what do you gentlemen think about this moment?
Perfect.
I love it.
Yes.
And if there was ever going to be a sequel, you could argue Richter lived without arms and would have even more revenge-minded. Sure. You know what I'm saying? So the fact that we never saw his body, I think, was maybe their way of thinking we might do a sequel down the road and he could come back. But I thought it was a great, great ending.
I think in the era of RoboCop and other movies like that, it was absolutely necessary for villains to meet a grisly end.
Yes.
And you
100%. Looked
forward to it as part of your experience watching the film. And this was a particularly satisfying one. I love things in movies that involve bad guys getting it and then some type of makeup effect or prosthetic effect that helps enhance it. And this is as good of one as you could get with the arms just completely ripped off. And then again, Conan the Barbarian standing there with these two shanks of meat above his head and then, calling off into the abyss, "See you at the party, Richter," and tossing the meat after him. It's perfect.
Here's a fun fact.
Oh boy.
I once almost had my arm ripped off by an elevator.
What?
Oh.
Yes. So I'll tell the story as briefly as I can. I was a freshman at Cal. They're doing a big production of, it was War of the Roses. So it was, I think, Henry VI, 1, 2, and 3, and Richard III. I'm on the stage crew. There's a lift that would lift the thrones out of the pit up on into the stage. And my job was to be in this little tiny room under the stage and open the door with a partner with this pole for the thrones to come up. Ooh. Okay. And they told me very clearly, do not get in the way of this lift when it goes by. It will rip your arm off. So we're doing this. We're in dress rehearsal, and I lift the thing up with my little pole, and my partner does, and the pole gets caught on one of these thrones, and I can see that as the lift comes off, it's going to rip the throne in pieces. It's going to rip this whole section of the throne off. I'm on a walkie, and I go, "Please stop the thrones." And I reach up, thinking quickly, to knock the pole off, and they didn't stop the thrones, and my arm got caught between two pieces of plywood on this lift that's going up. And I, because I'm very calm, am saying, "Stop the thrones, please stop the thrones." And they stop, and then I guess, and I'm like, "Stop, now lower the thrones." My arm is caught in the thrones. And I guess they didn't hear me, and so they cranked it up. And the thing went up like 3 or 4 more inches. And fortunately, the person my partner was not calm like me and started screaming at the top of her lungs, "You're going to rip his arm off. You're going to rip his..." And they finally stopped the thing. And I'm sitting there with my arm up onto the stage, and I look up through the crack, and I just am surrounded by all these guys in doublets with broadswords who are all looking down at me. And I'm like a little freshman with my arm. It took them about 20 minutes to lower the thing. I had a huge crease in my arm, which I had for about a decade after that.
Jeez.
This big scar. And I went, and my arm was fortunately in there flat. When I went to the doctor, they're like, "Look, if your arm had been at an angle, it would have definitely broken both bones." I didn't break the bones. And they were, and it was bleeding, but it hadn't, it cut me, but it wasn't deep. But yeah, so I definitely had a moment of thinking my arm was about to get ripped off by an elephant.
Oh, thanks.
So this scene was awesome for you, is what you're saying.
In fact, this was probably this was 2 years after that happened when this movie came out. I wonder if I had flashbacks. Quaid gets off the elevator. We're at this big altar. There's an alien handprint. He's about to put his hand in it. And there is Ronny Cox with a gun.
Don't touch that! Get away! Get back!
What are you afraid of? Turn it on.
Impossible! Once the reaction starts, it'll spread to all the turbinium in the planet. Mars will go into global meltdown. That's why the aliens never turned it on.
Now, to me, it's like nobody knows anything about what's going to happen when we start these reactors that are 500,000 years old and we don't know what they are.
Well, or he is also just bullshitting because he knows he can't ever have anything happen beneficial that takes the power away from him.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I think. Yeah.
Quaid still wants to do it, and I love Ronny Cox. I mean, I always love Ronny Cox, but I love him in this moment.
I didn't want it to end this way. I wanted Hauser back, but no. You had to be Quaid.
I am Quaid.
You're nothing. You're nobody. You're a stupid dream. Well, all dreams come to an end.
And he's about to kill him, and then he gets shot because there is Melina coming up in the elevator. There's this bomb to blow up the reactor, which he triggers. Arnold throws it out the window, triggers huge explosion. Now it's sucking them all out. Arnold's hanging by an electrical cable. And this one, I believe, is all on a 90-degree vertical set. So everybody's actually hanging down, just using gravity to create the illusion.
No! Don't do it! We'll all die! Everybody will die! No!
Quaid rips him off. He goes flying out onto the surface. This was shot on a hillside outside Mexico City. He can't breathe. His face starts to swell up. Quaid manages to drag himself forward, hits the button. Green light happens. The reactors go on. And then Quaid goes flying out on the Martian surface. Melina goes flying out. And then we have this sequence, which is intercutting between Cohaagen, Melina, and Quaid, or puppet versions of them, that are slowly swelling up in the low surface pressure and dying while the rods of the reactor are going down and hitting the ice and melting. And we have these explosions and gas and air and steam happening everywhere. So what do you think of this sequence going on, by the way, as the reactor gets activated and they're out on the surface?
I love the special effects of them all like flipping out on the surface, you know, because they're like, ah, but like there is a lot of damage that happens. Huge. Yeah, just to make this happen, right? So, yeah, change is never easy. Foundational change or structural change quickly is never easy, but you see that this is a massive, massive decision and the effects on everybody, because so many people are going to have injuries from this explosion. It leads to a happy ending, but right now, and at this point in the movie, it looks like he's done more harm than good. But the special effects of them wriggling around with the eyes popping out of them, that is awesome. And I love that about the movie.
I also very much like the payoff, much like the hologram, that this pays off the blue sky on Mars, which, you know, perked everyone's ears up when they heard it, you know, 95 minutes ago or whatever. And here you go with that as the payoff to this scene. And I think it's a great set piece and a good way to end any kind of like 90s special effects movie, and this one in particular. What I can never figure out, and maybe you guys have some thoughts on it, this is one thing I cannot like theorize around in the film, is this alien technology is, they say like 500,000 years old or something. Why didn't they use it?
I mean, they might have been using it and then turned it off. It got turned off when the aliens left or something.
They got to like the save on the electric bill. They can't leave these rods in the ground.
But I'm going to go back to like this. It doesn't make sense. I mean, like, you know, like, but yes, it does seem weird that there were aliens here who left this whole thing, who left it turned off. It basically seems like the solution at the end of a video game, or a, you know, what's a weird protection of this movie is that I would not accept some of Ronny Cox's just crazy villainy in a movie that I was making, because I don't like crazy villains. Right. But because of the way this movie is structured, that there's the possibility that it is all fake, then you kind of accept it all. You know what I mean? And I think this is an example of like, no, this is totally bizarre thing that they just left this for 500,000 years, and how do we know that it's going to work, and what is it going to do, and do they breathe the same air, and we don't know.
Well, and he has a reason for it. Ronny Cox says that's why they never turned it on, because they realized after they built it, it would destroy Mars, essentially.
Yeah, that makes, which again is like, well, how do you know that, Ronny
right?
Cox? Like, how did you figure that out? I think just going back, Brendon, to your point of this being sort of the tour de force of like this era of, or the culmination of it, is like if you look at this sequence and you think about, okay, we got puppet effects, we got makeup effects, we got practical full-size effects with explosions and glass breaking and rumbles and steam and smoke and all that stuff. We have massive amount of different kinds of miniatures interacting that are exploding and steam and all these things. I mean, it's like and none of this is CG. Everything that you are seeing, which is just good to remind people that are younger and watching movies today, everything was built in one way or another and really happened. And one other thing, by the way, and I know we brought this up on the show before, but in terms of scale, when you do miniatures, one of the things that makes your miniatures not work is particle size and gravity. Because something that is small, a miniature version of it, if you drop it, it falls at the speed based on its size. Yeah. So what you do, because things would all fall faster, is you put everything in slow motion. And so, but when you put everything in slow motion, it changes the way an explosion works, or it changes the way. And so when you're messing with something that's, if it's at 1/10 size or 1/5 size, well, then all of those things are different. And the other thing is anything that has particles like splashes, spray of water, dust. Well, water droplets exist in a specific size. And so when you look at it, a miniature with water that explodes, like if you looked at old footage of like, the Battle of Midway or something like that, that's a miniature, you can see that it's slow motion and the droplets don't look at the right size. Mm-hmm. And so all of the things they're trying to figure out when you see those big steam explosions and all that stuff is how to mitigate those. And I think in general, I think it's convincing almost throughout the entire thing.
Yes.
I never go like, wait, something felt kind of off. And that's the weird thing about being a special effects person or a movie person in general, is you actually have to spend a lot of time observing reality and then understanding why intuitively something doesn't look real, and then making adjustments in the way you build it to accomplish a sense of reality in something that's not real. I find that like these are amazing geniuses that many don't exist anymore because we don't make movies this way. As you mentioned, as this is happening and air is going everywhere and people are starting to breathe again, the skies are becoming blue, and the people in the we check in with people in Venusville, people in the restaurant, people at the hotel, and of course our people on the surface who were right on the edge of dying. And of course, Cohaagen didn't make it. But fortunately, when the air comes back, slowly those puppets start to shrink down, and we're back to Melina and Quaid looking around at the surface of Mars, which now has air on it.
I can't believe it. It's like a dream. What's wrong?
I just had a terrible thought. What if this is a dream?
It's so great because it brings us right back to that scene in the hotel room with Dr. Edgemore,
Well, then kiss me quick before you wake up.
And they kiss, and the yellow sun flashes the frame, and instead of going to black, we go to the white, and that is the end of the story. For some reason, I'm telling you, I can remember being really angry at the end of seeing this the first time in the Cinerama Dome in Concord, and I don't remember what my thought was. I think I wanted it to be like Brazil, where you cut at the end of Brazil and there's that twist. I wanted it to be a twist and not a mindfuck. And looking at it now, I go like, you were totally wrong. This is the right way to end the movie. How do you guys feel at the end of this film?
Satisfied. Very satisfied. Still now watching it again all these years later. Because of some of the, and this will be my final thoughts on the movie, because of all the elements that we've already talked about. The score here is so perfect. For those of us of a certain age who grew up with these kinds of films, like it is great nostalgia to go back and enjoy these scores all over again. And the how can I say this? The drumbeat of large events within a movie constantly being a part of it. People ask me all the time, why is 1980s music so loud, so big? And it's like, because we all thought the bomb was going to drop any day. So we were going all out with everything we were doing. And so this is like the final gasp of the 80s. This is a 1990 film, but you could see this as an 80s film with Schwarzenegger there because of the large story it's trying to tell. It is grandiose while also simplistic in ways, which makes it work. And it appeals to the right brain and the left brain consistently throughout the movie. And that is tough to do in a film like this. And it still works to this day. The fact that we, the three of us, are questioning what's real and what's not real as we're watching all the way to the end again all these years later proves to me that the film works and that we're still interested in talking about it. We're still interested in finding new things about it, new approaches, new analysis, all of that, and appreciating the performances, the script writing here, and some of the character work from everybody. So to me, overall, I think this film absolutely still holds up, still works, still one of the best of Schwarzenegger's, maybe in his top 5, I would argue, maybe top 3 for some people. And it's because of the story, Verhoeven's direction, the score here, and Schwarzenegger's performance and his ability to carry what is a deceptively complex movie about so much more than just a guy getting his mind wiped. It's commentary on classism, a commentary on the different financial strata, and a commentary overall on control and power over a populace, and how you have a choice to be good or evil depending on how your approach to the world is. So to me, this is still a fascinating, fun film to go back and enjoy 3 decades plus later.
Yeah, and I agree with your assessment that the ending is satisfying. Not only for me, when I watched it at the time, was I satisfied, I was relieved, because I do remember getting toward the end thinking, man, I really don't hope I hope they don't come down on one way versus the other. Like, what they've presented so far is so great. Like, I didn't want the movie to end telling me this is how it is. I was so happy with this ending when it happened. And in the years since, I mean, I've obviously watched this so many times, probably my most watched Arnold movie. And I've always just, treated it as it is. There's 2 realities and either one can be true. But it was really during this watch, and I brought this up earlier and I said I'd come back to talking about it, where there is a point in the movie where the 2 realities, one of them spikes into 2 realities in itself. So at the end here, with that fade to white, you are facing 3 story possibilities. And I think you could break them down with other movies, right? So you've got the one scenario is Wizard of Oz scenario, right? He was Doug Quaid. He went to REKALL. He went to sleep, or he got this implant. He had a dream. And now he's, once this white goes away, he's going to wake up, and you were there and you were there and you were there. But he's a changed man in some way. There is no place like home. He'll enjoy his life better as he moves forward. So that's now one reality that's possible. But the other, in that same scenario, is what Dr. Edgemere told him, that's what actually happened. And that instead we have a Jacob's Ladder type of ending here, where he is lobotomized, right? He will not wake up. He has had a schizoid embolism, and his life is over, essentially. He is dead. But this, in his memory, okay, right? Memory is not what makes a man, it's the action. So he is, in his last moments of life, acting as if he is a secret agent, as if he is the good man, not the bad man. He's chosen good over evil. He chose to stay Quaid, not become Hauser. So both of those are very hopeful endings in that sense. But the most hopeful ending is the third scenario, which is the Pinocchio scenario, right? He is Quaid, fake consciousness, artificial, and has now become a real boy, right? He has been given the option to make a moral choice, and he chose to do it. And like, as I look at all 3 of those, that is the one I want it most to be. Not for the reason that Verhoeven said, oh, you want this to be active. You want it to be real. You don't want what you're seeing to be a dream. I want the hope of, unlike Skynet and Terminator, that here you have artificial intelligence that was implanted in a body that chose to become good, that chose to do the right thing, and in a sense become the salvation of an entire planet. That's a beautifully hopeful story version here. And it just makes me love the movie even more, that you can extrapolate that from all 3 threads here and go like, well, again, back to what you said, John, satisfying. Each one is satisfying for a different reason.
Couple of things I want to add. One is I wanted to just briefly tell you what the actual short story, what happens in it, which is that there's a dude who goes to REKALL, finds out that he is a spy memory plant. It is true. There's no sense of different realities. And they're going to kill him because they have to cover something up. And so they have to figure out how to cover it up in order to allow him to keep living his life. And so they come up with a new explanation that in fact, because they have to somehow explain why there's a memory cap in his brain. And so they go, oh, well, you know what? We'll just create a fiction where aliens came and were going to destroy the Earth when you were a little kid, and you convinced them not to destroy the Earth, and they erased your memory of the event.
Because this was his other most preferred fantasy, right?
His other most preferred fantasy.
He the initial thing of being a spy was like, well, this is what I want, right? And they put him under and then find out, no, he really was a spy. So for this one, they're like, okay, well, what would be like the most preferred way for us to do this? And he's got this, fantasy of aliens coming, and he met them
when he was a little kid. And so they go to create that only to discover that it wasn't a fantasy, that in fact aliens did visit him when he was a little kid. And that as soon as he dies, the only reason they're keeping the planet Earth alive is because of him. And when he dies, aliens are going to come destroy the planet. And then they erase his memory. And that's where you leave the story.
Well, I believe they're going to like give him some type of commendation while he's under, so that this doesn't happen again, because they know, oh gosh, we got to keep this guy alive now.
A couple of the things about production, as you know, Arnold loves pranks, so there were all sorts of pranks. He also arranged for water pistol battles with the crew. He had parties. He had rewards for good days' works and best. Like, he did all this stuff to help morale that I think is really, really cool for the movie star and producer on the movie. Also heard a story. Apparently, Michael Ironside's sister was really sick. Like,
this is true. This is true. Yep.
And that Arnold helped him stay in touch with her. And then Ironside later found out that Arnold was also regularly calling her just to make sure she was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ironside said that I'd heard all these things about Arnold, worked on the film, then he did that, and I have been his supporter for life because he did that. So yeah.
Stuff like that's awesome.
Yes, agreed. Because he doesn't have to, right?
So often we hear the opposite stories, you know? Yeah. And Arnold is not a perfect person, obviously. There's all sorts of things. You know, I already said I didn't really want to hang out with him in the 80s, but there's stuff about him that I really, really like.
Yeah.
Obviously, a couple of post things. This is, as we said, a huge, huge special effects movie with, 20,000 square feet of miniatures in one warehouse, additional stuff from ILM. The score apparently was supposed to be done in Munich, and I've heard two different stories on this. One story is that Jerry Goldsmith had a great experience with the Munich Symphony and wanted to work with them. Another story was that the producers wanted to go to Munich because they were cheap and would save money. I don't know which one is true.
I believe the second one.
Me too. Because then what happened is they go to Munich, they start scoring, and the symphony couldn't handle it. It was just too complicated. And so they ended up bagging it and going to the London Philharmonic, who actually recorded it.
Wow.
The movie was released early. They had to move it forward several weeks because they didn't want to compete with Dick Tracy. Apparently, they didn't even do a full screen test on this film. Like, they were just barely finishing it. And as we mentioned many times, lots of cuts to avoid an X rating. It opened up at number 1. It made $261 million that year, which is the 5th highest grossing movie of the year. Budget was somewhere between 48 and 80 million. If it's on the 80 million side, it is one of the biggest, most expensive movies ever made at the time. It was nominated for sound effects editing, which it did not win, as you said. John, you mentioned a sequel.
Yeah.
There were plans of a sequel at the time, and this was the idea, was they wanted to use the mutants that were introduced on Mars as the precogs in Minority Report for a Minority Report sequel starring Arnold.
Oh.
Isn't that crazy?
How would that even work? Would he have to find out even more about what's been going? Like, is there someone above Cohaagen that he would have to take down? I wonder.
I think it was just going to be the story of Minority Report transferred into Quaid as a character, right?
Yeah.
And so now Quaid is on Mars. I don't know whether he's now part of the
chief
police
policeman or something,
right? Yeah. But the mutants are the precogs, so he's got to work with them, and then he'll be framed for a crime or something.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah.
But I do enjoy that this movie rejected a sequel like a body rejecting an organ. Like it makes perfect sense that like this is a sui generis situation that this movie ever worked out. And I think, again, as we mentioned, is indicative of the poorly received remake that they did. this worked because of the time and place it was made, and most importantly, because of Arnold and how he was just committed from start to finish to getting it done. Because it had been in the works for a decade plus ahead of time. Nothing happened. They tried to make the sequels. Nothing happened. So this is it's one of those diamond in the rough movies. It wasn't going to happen any other way other than the way it got made.
Yeah.
Well, and any sequel ruins the movie.
Yes.
Because if you do a sequel, you're essentially saying that he really is a spy living on Mars.
Right.
You're rejecting the whole thing that is the key that makes the movie work.
Right. Or if you're not doing it, you're making a flimsy movie where from the start, you're knowing, well, this is potentially a continuation of the fantasy that was going on in the last movie, that grounds you in nothing.
I will give my final thoughts first, which is I really had both dismissed and disrespected this movie, I think. I loved it. I liked it when it came out. I watched it a bunch, and I think, post-film school, post-filmmaking, I didn't really go back and watch all these Arnold movies, and I recently have been doing it. And in particular, going back to this one, is that I think the things that I maybe dismissed about it are the things that Verhoeven was making fun of. You know what I mean? Was like the hyper-violence, the aggressiveness, some of the sexuality, some of the super evilness of Cohaagen, the psychoness of Richter and all that stuff. And I had sort of lumped this in a way with movies that I really shouldn't have, because in going through this with you guys, there's this thing about the 80s that I think is so fascinating, which is, it was freewheeling and it was aggressive and violent and all this stuff. But it also, particularly with this movie with RoboCop, was examining all that stuff. And Arnold, who was doing all these violent movies, was now commenting on it and playing with it in ways that I think I had overlooked. And so, Brendon, I'm really, really glad that you recommended this, because it's brought me back to, as we said, special effects and action filmmaking just at its pinnacle. And then also, I think this is a perfect 1990s movie, as it's a perfect coda to the violent, aggressive film in the 80s. And I also go like, oh, we have Marvel movies and superhero movies and sci-fi movies. There's a lot of kind of movies, including action movies and creature movies and gross out movies and all this kind of stuff that we don't really have anymore. And that makes me really sad. So I was really glad to revisit it. John, what are your final thoughts?
I don't think I can add more to what I said earlier. And I think what you just said is fantastically perfect, brother. It reminds us of a time when we loved these kinds of movies coming out and diving back into these worlds. And the fact that it still echoes into what we see nowadays in our sci-fi and our sci-fi films speaks to the lasting legacy of this movie and of Arnold Schwarzenegger, to be honest.
Brendon, do you have final thoughts on Total Recall and on Arnold Schwarzenegger?
Well, I mentioned when we did this the last time, the reason I picked this movie is because it is my favorite Arnold movie. And I don't think it's the best movie Arnold made, but I think it is the movie I enjoy as being an Arnold movie the most. And I, kind of had to interrogate that for myself and go like, well, what do I mean by that? What is Arnold? And it's a lot of what you were saying there, Steve, like what he represented to the 80s and the kind of style changes from one era of kind of cultural bravado to another. But no matter what, Arnold is still a one of one. There was no other Arnold, and there won't be another Arnold. And as you guys have examined with Stallone, right, the closest analog to Arnold, like to me, if you put those two guys up against each other, what's your preference, Arnold or Sly? It's Arnold in a walk. And the reason for that is not because I'm more like Arnold or he hits my preferences more. It's, I think, because I'm such a fan of movies, and I'm a fan of the fantasy element of movies. I mean that in not a genre sense, but what movies do, what movies allow in terms of us escaping and entering another place and feeling other people's feelings and their worlds. Sly was always in his own head, in his own thoughts, in a kind of high consideration for what he was doing as an artist. And I appreciate that. I think a great example of this is the movie Cliffhanger, right? Where if you go back and revisit Cliffhanger, which is not really a great movie to revisit, it doesn't have a ton of rewatchability. And one of the reasons, I think, is because the movie opens with a pretty spectacular scene that's very tragic, horribly tragic, but very well done, where he is not able to rescue the wife of his friend and she falls to her death. And then this sets in motion a plot where he is considering his guilt and culpability in this, and it's pretty good drama. And like I remember watching Cliffhanger a little while ago and going like, why does this movie not why doesn't it resonate with me the way like something like Die Hard does? And there's a Die Hard plot in Cliffhanger. And I think the reason is it's never able to get over the DNA of that drama that was put into it. And I'm like, well, I appreciate that about Stallone, but it was a mistake that Arnold would never make. And I think the reason why, and they're both pretty aware, soulful guys, but what Arnold always knew, and you go back to Pumping Iron, and maybe this is a little preview for you guys when you're going to watch this, is that when he was talking with us on WTF, he said to Mark, I knew the stuff that I was saying during that was going to bring attention to bodybuilding. You know, Mark was asking him about it, basically like, were you like, you're almost doing like a stand-up routine in Pumping Iron. Like, where did that come from? And he was like, I just knew it would get attention, and that's what I wanted it to do. I wanted it to get attention. And so you saw from this very early age, this guy had charm, he had salesmanship, he had self-awareness, and when it comes to getting involved in the Hollywood magic factory, he then is able to take all that stuff and go into these fantasy areas, whether it's Commando as the, you know, military muscle, Conan as you know, a true fantasy Middle Ages style mental image we have of something fantastical from the past. Or then, you know, you get into him as like a cop in Red Heat. And all of these things that he was working with, like the archetypes in movies at the time, it all kind of coalesces right here and now when Total Recall is being made. But like before this is Twins, which is his biggest hit at the time. And so you're looking at this guy, it's like, it shouldn't make sense that he's both good at comedy and action and all of this, but the idea that he took Total Recall from page to screen and shepherded it through as an auteur, like all the things we've mentioned over these 2 episodes of like the ways he really wanted to get this thing made, showed he knew full confidence in himself that he could get this done just the same way he could get Twins done, just the same way he could get Kindergarten Cop done, just the same way he could get T2 done. And where does it finally fail and fall apart? Right after T2, his follow-up is Last Action Hero, which I still think is a very good movie. I enjoy it thoroughly. But what doesn't connect with that movie? It's too much self-awareness. It is Arnold making fun of Arnold the whole time. And you're finally at this point where you're like, oh, you're telling me this was a joke all along? Well, then I don't agree. I don't buy in. Even if you like the movie, audiences didn't go to it because they didn't want to be put in their face that this was all a gag. And he rebounds with True Lies, which is also kind of very autobiographical there. The guy living 2 lives, True Lies. And I always think of that movie as both his rebound and farewell at the same time. That he never became this Total Recall, Kindergarten Cop, T2 Arnold ever again. And that it was his way of saying, like, I'm going to put these 2 parts of me together, right? The goofy comedy guy and the crazy action star. And we're going to reconcile. We're going to reconcile the issues that you had with me saying, I'm too much of this, right? I'm going over the top too much. And a guy like James Cameron was easily able to be like, to reconcile that with him. And so he kind of sunsets his action career. I know he has a racer after that, and that did well, but then it's diminishing returns following that. Yeah. And so my feeling with Total Recall is that it is the bright shining moment of Arnold the artist, right? It's of him finally figuring out, I can take all of my powers, all the things that I've done to put myself in the front and be a big superstar, be a global name. Everyone knows my name, even though it's this crazy hard to pronounce name. And I am going to use it for the thing that I know I can be without anybody else telling me, oh, well, this guy is too normal. He's too this, he's too that. It's not Arnold. It's Richard Dreyfuss. It's Dennis Quaid. Nope. Arnold's like, it's me, and I'm going to show you I'm going to do it. And as we, all three of us, have identified at some point in talking about this movie, it's his best performance. And, you can wait 2 years to T2 to see like how this guy really became iconic and has all the, physical attributes of the greatest action star in the world. I say it's this movie to watch where you go, I get Arnold as not just an icon, as not just an action hero, as not just a self-parody. I get him as a brain. I get him as a heart. I get him as who he was and who he understood himself to be in the landscape of Hollywood.
Okay, so first of all, that was fantastic.
Yep.
Second of all, we are now 2 hours and 30-something minutes into this conversation, but I feel like you just opened up something which, if you will indulge me, I feel like we need to address for another moment if you guys have time.
Yes.
Okay.
Because it's the Arnold and Sly comparison. And that John and I did a whole short on patreon.com/the Cine-Files on it. We've talked about it before. But what you made me think about is there's something, I don't mean this as a criticism, but it's going to sound that way. There is something fundamentally manufactured about Arnold and his image that was thought about in Pumping Iron, is that he was doing something for a purpose beyond what he wanted in the moment when the documentary was being filmed. He was thinking ahead. He's thinking about his image. He's thinking about controlling his career. He's thinking about all those things. And this is why, and I love Arnold, and I think that's been well established in the course of this episode, but it is also why Arnold Schwarzenegger never made me cry in a movie, and Sylvester Stallone did. Because Sylvester Stallone, while he is certainly thinking about his career when he's not letting anyone else play Rocky Balboa, when he is playing Rocky Balboa, there's not pretense. You know what I mean? Like, he, as an actor, is able to do the thing that actors are supposed to do, which is fully inhabit the reality of a character in a way that Arnold would never be able to. He's not capable of that. And in fact, when we talk about these movies like Terminator, obviously Total Recall, Last Action Hero, True Lies, these are all examples, Kindergarten Cop, where he is playing a character, playing a role. And so there are these levels of falseness that allow him to exist within his acting range that's just different from Sly.
And it's why the end of the road for him always wound up being the project, right? If the project could fit him, that was it. It wasn't about like he would lose himself in some project that wasn't fitting to him.
Yeah, Arnold is the movie star, Sly is the actor. And that is the difference, right? And look, Arnold, and I think you delivered maybe the greatest final thoughts we've ever gotten, Brendon, and I'm not kissing your ass at all. I'm like legitimately telling you that we've ever gotten from a guest on the show. Maybe even better than anything Steve and I ever said.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know, I apologize. But it's a fantastic treatise on Arnold Schwarzenegger, and you're absolutely right. And what you say here about the project, he was very project dependent, and that was the limit. And so once we got out of Arnold, because like that late 90s is when Arnold starts to have physical issues. The affairs pop up a little bit later. We found out all this kind of stuff. So the tarnish wore off because Arnold flew too close to the sun. Even the greatest of us has limits. And that's what ended up happening for him. But Stallone has reinvented himself as an actor multiple times throughout his career. And that's because he is, at the end of the day, an actor who became a movie star, but really just wanted to be a successful actor. Whereas Schwarzenegger was already built as a movie star. And Steve, I hear your point about him manufacturing it all, but there has been very few people who've been able to manufacture and feel genuine at the same time.
Totally.
And I think that's where what Brendon said earlier, that's what makes Schwarzenegger one of one, because it is almost impossible. Shatner has the worst acting style you've ever seen, but it works for him 100%. There are just certain people who can do these things that everyone else would look ridiculous doing, but they have hit the right notes in the right way, and they understand it inherently, intrinsically, and that's what makes them unique. And that is also part of why we subconsciously love them, because we see it, we know it, we sense it, and we love the fact that he's getting away with it, you know? And so there's a sense that with Schwarzenegger and with Stallone, it's a completely different thing. And yeah, Arnold's never made me cry, but Schwarzenegger has never made me laugh the way Arnold has in any of his films.
Not
and when he
film.
tries to do comedy or action comedy, it never really works fully, like what we saw in Oscar and other things, or even when he tries to do those one-liners, nobody could match Schwarzenegger with the quips, aside from maybe Bruce Willis in Die Hard. And that speaks volumes also as a tool in a toolbox for an actor.
So that is what we think of Total Recall and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Of course, we'd love to hear all your thoughts. You can visit us on our Facebook page. Just do a search for the Cine-Files. It's Cine_Files on Twitter or X. It's the Cine-Files podcast on Instagram. You can subscribe to the show at all the subscribey places. Please do so if you haven't already. If you haven't left a review on Apple Podcasts, we would genuinely appreciate it. You can also do ratings and reviews on Spotify, comments on YouTube. You can buy or stream Total Recall along with every other movie we've ever reviewed on cinephiles.net. And of course, you can support the shows we've discussed many times on patreon.com/thecine-files, as well as the Apple Podcast subscription page. Both of those will get you access to ad-free versions of the show, as well as our Cine-Files shorts. And of course, you want to reach me. It's SR Morris on Twitter and SR Morris1 on Instagram. John, how would people reach you?
Yeah, you can always find me at The Rocha Says on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. You can find me at my YouTube channel as well, youtube.com/John Rocha Says, where I do all my shows there, The Jedi Way, The Hot Mic, The Geek Buddies, and my other podcasts, The Geek Buddies and The Hot Mic. There are separate podcast feeds for you all to subscribe to. And all my reviews and trailers reactions are there as well.
And Brendon, I echo everything John said about your final thoughts. You are, as I've said many times now, one of us, and we would love to have you back. Thank you so much for coming on the show to discuss this movie.
Thank you guys. I will get my ass back here.
That's fantastic.
And if anyone wants to hear more stuff like this, probably the best way is for our WTF subscribers on WTF Plus. We do twice weekly bonus shows, and a lot of that involves talk about movies and talk about TV. And it's not just the interview show that is the main feed of WTF. So if you want to be a subscriber to that, go to WTFpod.com. And it's a lot of stuff just like this, what you guys were sitting here talking about. So I very much appreciate you having me on. And I really look forward to the time we can think up something else to talk about.
And it's funny, I've been thinking about something for the last couple of weeks. As you know, I've been a fan of WTF since almost the beginning. And guess what? I'm becoming a subscriber. I finally took the jump. So you made one sell right here. Hopefully other people will sign up as well.
Oh, awesome. Thanks so much.
And I think that is it for this week. We will be back next time for another great film right here on the Cine-Files.